Chapter 378. Luoya looked at Antonio with a serious expression, and the latter nodded affirmatively. The dream demon bloodline is in that country, but I can't get any help from them. What I want you to do is to get their support and push forward the plan. There's nothing wrong with what you've said. But since that's the case, why did you allow our conflict to continue, Dean? Isn't this the opposite of your goal? You mean, there's something you're hiding? Naturally, Roha heard the word school before, but as a traditional jutsu master, his knowledge of martial arts is limited, it's almost a blank. That's the school of the royal family of knights, the Cobnet family. It's one of the 3 core powers of the Cobnet family, together with the source substance, courage, and the dragon bloodline. Strictly speaking, it's a special curse. The source substance was an unavoidable part of Shia's supernatural power, and it was also the core of the supernatural system. But just like traditional conjurers who created all kinds of curses to strengthen their power, the knights who leaned towards the physical body also found many ways to strengthen their power. One of them was the school of thought, and its essence was actually a kind of pseudo-source substance. Lofty ideals, firm principles, unshakable determination, and the stronger the will, the more invincible and powerful the heart's sword would be. It could even reach the level of a holy sword when developed to the limit. I understand the situation of the heart's sword school, but what does it have to do with the conflict between us? The reason why I let the conflict happen is simple. It's because the conflict will inevitably happen, and the sooner it happens, the less impact it will have on both sides. Because the path you're taking is too different from the traditional classicism of the Ald family and the Twilight Sage Association. Hearing this unexpected word, Luoya couldn't help but frown slightly, and Antonio immediately gave an answer. Traditional classicism advocates sacrificing one's own fame and fortune to protect the human world while hiding in the darkness. The current country of knights pursues this. Their closed environment and the fact that Williams is wearing a suit of armor might have something to do with this. But what about you? In order to build a strong will, the Heart Sword School will often be too strict on their successors. Williams was able to endure the armor and tough training for a long time because of his classical chivalry. This is probably one of the components of his Heart Sword School. However, your path is completely different from his. This conflict of ideas is inevitable. After understanding Williams' situation, Luoya nodded slightly. He finally understood Antonio's actions. It had to be said that after knowing the full picture, Luoya also felt that the conflict between the two parties was inevitable. After all, it was impossible for him to give up his current life. On the other hand, Luoya also praised and disapproved of the classical chivalry attitude in his heart. The reason was the change in environment. Back then, the Ald family was the shadow of the royalty and the uncrowned king of the human world. They didn't need to stand in front of the stage and shout. The ancient Austin Empire was the only administrative body that was highly related to the fate of the entire human world. They could allocate enough resources for the Ald family, centralize their advantages, and resolve the crisis without affecting the normal activities of most humans. But now, the people's hearts were scattered, and it was hard to lead them. In the current environment, even if one were to stand on the side of the road and shout, "Save the world," with a loudspeaker, no one would be willing to spend a cent or contribute a little, let alone in the dark. In the end, if one didn't centralize power and resources, there would often be big problems in the face of a great crisis. This was a law that had been proven in Luoya's previous life. From a human's perspective, Luoya felt that this kind of mechanism without positive feedback wasn't right. Noble idealists were indeed admirable, but should idealists starve? If this is the difference in ideas, then we might not be able to get along well. Dean, do you have any good ideas? Past experience? I'm afraid you are more special to her. The old man thought as he gazed at Luoya with a meaningful smile. Chapter 379. On the street at night, Luoya strolled around the campus with a cane in his hand. He recalled the inexplicable look from Dean Antonio before he left and felt something was wrong. It was unrealistic to tell others his thoughts without reservation unless the two parties had enough trust, which Luoya and Antonio obviously didn't have. Listening to the noise of the students walking around at night, Luoya strolled away from Antonio's office building after a detailed discussion and walked in the direction of the mantra station. However, before he walked far, he suddenly heard the sound of the system bell. The advice of the goddess of fate, huh? Drink juice. Although the conversation with Antonio was easy, the two sides were not close to the point of drinking tea and chatting. After wasting a lot of time talking, Luoya didn't drink a drop of water, which made his throat a little uncomfortable, and the dried nuts he ate before coming here made him feel a little angry. Full of doubts, Luoya thought for a moment and changed his route. He followed the nearby crowd into the commercial street and found that it was the most lively time of the commercial street. It's actually so lively. Looking at the absolute majority of the gathered crowd, Luoya couldn't help but sigh at the merchant's grasp of the appearance of the food. Just when he was wondering why the advice asked him to come here, a familiar figure appeared in the crowd in front of Luoya's eyes. At night, with so many people buying, it was difficult for the girl who couldn't speak and could only write to communicate. She may also attract the attention of others, especially after the conflict with Luoya and others in the afternoon. As a transfer student, she was too conspicuous. It's so beautiful, do you want to try that? I see, then I'll buy it for you. Hearing the sudden question, the girl who nodded subconsciously was slightly taken aback. It was not until this moment that she finally recovered her senses. Teresa turned her head and looked at the side in surprise. When she saw the black-haired boy beside her, she couldn't help but widen her eyes. Good evening, Mr. Luoya. After listening to Luoya's words, the blushing girl wrote these two sentences in a panic, then held the book in front of her chest. However, after seeing the girl's reply, Luoya was silent. He looked at the sign next to the popular stall, thought for a moment, and said. Seeing Teresa like this, Luoya couldn't help but smile. After a short wait, the black-haired boy finally succeeded in bringing back two colorful drinks for the girl. The two people tasted side by side at the long public table on the side of the road. Huh. Miss Teresa's throat is easily dry. Chapter 380. He's been waiting for you. Williams is waiting for me. What does that mean? If she wanted to explain this sentence, it would be difficult to avoid touching on some of William's secrets. Although Roja should be very reliable from his standpoint, this kind of thing wasn't something Teresa could decide to say. Thinking of this, the girl sighed and slowly shook her head toward Roja. The black-haired boy saw this and tacitly didn't ask again. He nodded and picked up the cup and drank the juice. Such a thought flashed through Luoya's mind and made his heart feel heavy. But after looking at the young lady beside him, he sighed in relief. Teresa was one of the core members of the group from the country of Knights. She was also the most normal person Luoya felt. It was important for Luoya to establish a good relationship with her. Thinking of this, the young man understood the importance of this suggestion. But then, a question appeared in his mind. 1 second to remember. Teresa, are you visiting the academy? If so, I can introduce you. No, actually, I'm looking for someone. Yes, it's Brittany. I couldn't find her after dinner. Seeing the name on the young lady's notebook, the black-haired young man suddenly thought of something and was dumbfounded. In the forest outside the Blue Hall, a golden-haired girl wearing light armor was peeking at the elegant mansion through the gaps of the leaves. She looked at the lights on the first floor of the building that went out one by one, and the sound of her breathing couldn't help but become heavier. But such a genius, after entering St. Freya Academy, unexpectedly met her fiancé who ran away from home to escape the marriage contract. She didn't dare to take him away because she met someone she couldn't fight against. That was the target of this transfer operation, Luoya caught. If she fought, she definitely couldn't defeat him. If she wanted, she probably couldn't take him away either. But there might be other ways. Although there was a man named Paul by Gayloc's side, he was only a grade 5 source grade and wasn't much of a hindrance. According to the information they gathered during this half a day, most of the students in Sangji Hall were first years and there weren't many who were strong. Then, if I rush in now, wouldn't I advise you not to do that? All of a sudden, Brittany's body stiffened as she was about to launch a surprise attack. She turned around and saw a pair of golden eyes looking at her calmly from the depths of the forest under the shadow of the lush foliage. The emotionless gaze seemed to be silently persuading her to calm down. Brittany's pupils contracted when she discovered the young man behind her. The fear in her heart made her want to release her curse, but she was afraid of provoking the unfathomable man. While she was in a dilemma, Luoya spoke again. Teresa. In any case, the friendly relationship between Luoya and Teresa eased Brittany's nerves slightly. Luoya also heaved a sigh of relief upon seeing this. Mr. Luoya, I am his fiancé. If you stop me, I will, help? What do you mean? I've heard about the incident with the Rund family and what you've done. I'll just tell you the result. If this continues, the engagement will be annulled. As soon as Luoya said this, Brittany, who already had a premonition, felt as though she was struck by lightning. She held on to the tree trunk beside her as her eyes glowed like a dead fish. However, just as she was in despair, Luoya suddenly changed the topic. Hope. Help each other. What do you mean? I'll say this first. I won't be a traitor. Miss Brittany, you're overthinking it. I only hope that you can help me establish a friendly relationship with Williams. This will only be beneficial for both of us. Or do you prefer to treat me as an enemy? Brittany hesitated upon hearing Luoya's question. Establishing a good relationship with Luoya was the goal of the Country of Knights, so there didn't seem to be any problems. However, she had to admit that forming such an alliance in private made her feel like she was betraying her teammate. Miss Brittany, I can actually provide you with something else. A set of cutlery and blanket from Gerlach. Luoya revealed a satisfied smile as he looked at the young lady who widened her eyes in excitement. Spy +1. Chapter 381. This attribute can be mild or severe, but the Valkyrie's blood has one advantage, which is that it's normal for an outsider, and this is the premise for Roja and Brawny to communicate. The third blessing was probably to get closer to Teresa and stop Brittany from running amok. But this was just a facade. The real purpose was to rope in the Knight's country and create the conditions to awaken Estrella. Luoya sighed and returned to his room. As soon as he entered the room, a silver-haired figure hugged him. Ai Lizzie. Why are you here again? Isn't the bed fixed? Big brother, Teacher Chris's kitchen utensils are broken, so he asked me to come here for dinner. Kitchen utensils after the bedding? Forget about the bed, how could the pot be broken? Luoya was full of questions but couldn't find a way to retort. He pinched his brows and looked at the adorable young lady. It was supposed to be like this, but my ability detected suspicious activity nearby. For safety reasons, I waited here for Big Brother. But judging from the situation just now, she seems to be your guest. Is it because of the moonlight? I feel like Ai Lizzie's ability is amazing. You sent her away with just a set of tableware and a blanket. What a pitiful woman. I've already, cough. I mean, her interests aren't good. With the help of his strategic ally, Teacher Chris, tonight was the second night that Ai Lizzie successfully stayed behind. But if things went according to plan, Luoya would have to sleep in the empty room on the second floor. This wasn't something Ai Lizzie could tolerate. How could she make use of this rare opportunity to block Big Brother's escape route? By the way, Big Brother, how about we play chess tonight? How about watching the moon after chess? How about taking a bath after watching the moon? Luoya, who was helpless in the face of Ai Lizzie's continuous coquettishness, turned to look at the silver-haired girl with a stern look. What's wrong with that? Didn't I bathe with Big Brother before? Could it be that Big Brother doesn't like Ai Lizzie anymore? When they grow up, they will find their younger sister annoying or something. When did I say that you're annoying? AI Lizzie, don't overthink things. That's because you've grown up, The black-haired youth ridiculed in his heart. He looked at the beautiful girl under the moonlight, whose beauty was even more soul-stirring. His eyes swept across her body that had already begun to develop. He only felt a restless flame rampaging through his body, burning his heart and making him panic. As she grew older, AI Lizzie's charm grew stronger and stronger, and the power of the perfect origin substance began to manifest itself. Luoya was already at the limit of what she could do normally, and the consequences of bathing together were unimaginable. Then, I want to sleep with you tonight. Hearing AI Lizzie's request, Luoya couldn't help but hesitate. Seeing him like this, AI Lizzie's red eyes began to fill with tears again. She bit her lips as if she was about to cry, forcing the black-haired youth to nod. I understand, big brother. Am I spoiling her too much? But, how should a normal brother and sister get along? A few years ago in the Akot family, the young Luoya often played board games with AI Lizzie in their pajamas. Because the two of them had a lot of private lessons during the day, they could only be together at night, and it wasn't taboo to fall asleep when they were tired from playing. However, as the saying goes, after Luoya became the acting feudal lord, he became busier and busier, and it had been a long time since he played with AI Lizzie like this. The moonlight tonight was very good, and AI Lizzie who was bathed in the moonlight was full of energy. The two of them played until it was close to midnight, and the result was naturally AI Lizzie defeating Luoya who automatically went easy on himself. The two of them played until they were tired, and after looking at the moon for a while by the window, the silver-haired girl yawned. Luoya saw this and smiled, officially asking to rest. Big brother, this is... In the darkness after the lights were turned off, Luoya and AI Lizzie silently prepared to sleep, but not long after, the girl's weak voice suddenly came from the other side of the 38th parallel. Then how did you sleep at Teacher Chris's place? Now, you can fall asleep, right? Feeling the warmth by her hand, the silver-haired girl was silent for a moment before answering softly, and she couldn't help but smile sweetly. Just like this, the two of them held hands and fell into a sweet dream. The next morning, when Luoya woke up, the silver-haired girl was already lying on his chest. Looking at the border that was completely torn apart by AI Lizzie, the boy sighed slightly, but he didn't pursue the matter. The main reason for this decision was naturally that Luoya didn't want to become enemies with the people from the country of knights, and another reason was that the responsibility of the enforcers was to maintain the stability of the academy. Although Williams and the others said that, at least until now, their actions didn't cause any harm to the order of the academy. Explosive Spell Learning and Practice Class. This was one of the classes in Luoya's class schedule, and it was famous for its long name. It was a prerequisite class for the spell practice class, and its purpose was to train the extraordinaire's spell casting speed. It was a class that leaned more towards actual combat. Another grading standard for this class was the destructive power of the instantaneous explosive spell casting. After all, speed alone wasn't enough to solve the problem. Sufficient destructive power was needed to defeat the enemy on the battlefield, otherwise, there was a high probability of being killed by the enemy who was driven to desperation. Luoya's explosive spell casting was an advantage that even Lillian, who didn't have a good relationship with him, praised endlessly. Not to mention the students, even the teacher of this class couldn't compare with him. If it wasn't for the fact that this class was compulsory, Luoya would have skipped it directly. After all, it was really a waste of time for him. As a student who skipped 1/3 of the class, even if there was a reason for it, Luoya still felt a little guilty, so he decided to have a proper attitude during the exam. But what he didn't expect was that when the class started, an unexpected figure appeared under the guidance of the teacher. It was the transfer student, Williams. Transfer student. In the last row of the classroom, a black-haired boy and a figure in armor looked at each other from afar. Their gazes weren't sharp, but they only had eyes for each other. Luoya thought so in his heart, but these thoughts weren't important to the old teacher George. After a brief introduction of Williams, the white-bearded old man announced the official start of the exam class. But what surprised Luoya and all the students was that the target of their spells wasn't the target of the training ground, but a goose. Looking at the goose that was grabbed by the neck by the old man, George, and brought to an open area, the students were puzzled for a moment. However, George didn't care about the students' reaction. He cast spells to block the pecking of the big white goose and calmly said to the students, "Let's go." After saying that, the old man walked to a table and sat down. The confident students began to line up one by one to show off their skills. For a moment, flames and thunder appeared one after another, and the sound of explosions was deafening. Within a second, the spells that the students released violently bombarded the splitting geese, causing explosions. After each explosion, the number of geese on the ground would change accordingly. After a big fireball, 5 small geese appeared on the scorched ground, and then they gathered together in a flash of light. Seeing this magical scene, the students were shocked, but they didn't have any more worries. Thus, one by one, the Cursemancers who used geese as their combat power unit were born. Jack, 2 geese. The armored knight walked to the side of the weapon rack and casually picked up an ordinary long sword. In the next moment, the atmosphere around Williams changed. Yes, the Cursemancer aside, the knight's sword was a close-range attack. If it was a long-range attack, the curse power could be released, but naturally, it wasn't as strong as directly attached to the sword. In fact, many students in the classroom also rushed up to attack, but looking at the target in the distance, Williams didn't have any intention of approaching. Not going over. Do you still need to use a sword at such a long distance? The violent fluctuation of the curse power caused a buzzing sound. When the long sword slashed down, there was no light flying out. Instead, it left an extremely condensed long line of light in the eyes of everyone. In the next moment, the target in the distance was instantly blasted into thousands of pieces by countless magic elements, floating in the air like powder. Williams, out of the range of measurement, full marks. So this is the Heart Sword sect. Mr. Luoya, what do you think of my strength? Facing Williams' question, Luoya thought for a moment and replied with a smile. However, what he didn't expect was that his plain words made the armored figure very happy, and then he directly gave a suggestion. Hearing Williams's invitation again, the black-haired young man couldn't help but be slightly stunned and thought silently. Chapter 382. On the lawn, the armored girl looked at the young man who was smiling at her. Her heart was beating fast and she couldn't help but extend her sincere invitation. That's right. In the eyes of the girl, one of the reasons why Luoya didn't immediately join forces with her was because she hadn't displayed enough strength yet. For this reason, she found an opportunity to display a part of her strength today, and this indeed earned Luoya's praise. I'm sorry, Your Highness Williams. Thank you for your invitation, but I don't have such plans for now. Hearing Luoya's reply, the girl fell into silence for a moment. However, what she didn't expect was Luoya's next words. Your Highness Williams, last night I went to look for the Dean, who is also the former guardian of the Twilight Sage Association, Antonio. I had a conversation with him and learned about the situation and ideals of the country of knights. I give you my highest respect for your perseverance. Hearing Luoya's words, the girl in the armor couldn't help but reveal a surprised expression. The identity of guardian Antonio was a highly confidential information even in the country of knights. Williams found it unbelievable that Luoya knew about him. However, the young man's next words made her widen her eyes. Untimely. What do you mean? That kind of thing isn't necessary. In the past countless years, the Twilight Sage Association has been maintaining order in the dark and left behind glorious results. I don't think there's anything wrong with this model. Moreover, most of the crises don't require so many useless people. Just a few elites can solve it. That's right, it's you and me. I'm talking about your tribe and the Dawn Association. Indeed, for most of the crises, the role of high-tier transcendence is far beyond that of low-tier transcendence. The difference in strength between them can't be made up with numbers. However, in some special situations, the situation is the opposite. For example, the situation at the borders hasn't been optimistic in recent years. For that kind of thing, we can just join hands when the time comes. After the Twilight Sage Guild has disappeared for hundreds of years, I believe that the most important thing is to follow the tradition and re-establish the spirit of chivalry that is centered on protection and not moved by fame and fortune. As long as we have such determination. Although following the tradition of 1,000 years ago is admirable, if we don't keep up with the times, how is it different from the unchangeable ancestral teachings? Only talk about the spirit and not the material. I don't think that's the right thing to do. Selfless dedication is admirable, but the right thing to do is to be rewarded. I don't think that willpower alone can sustain such determination for a long time. For thousands of years, the Cognate family has always kept the tradition in mind and cultivated the next generation with the spirit of chivalry. I have also paid a lot for this. Mr. Luoya, are you questioning me and my family? Upon hearing William's words, Luoya couldn't help but be slightly taken aback. He stared at the heavy armor in front of him and suddenly recalled the difficulties Teresa had mentioned to him. Thinking of this, the youth's expression changed as he hastily replied. There seems to be a quarrel over there. The crowd began to whisper among themselves, but neither of them cared. At this time, Luoya was thinking of a way to change Williams's mind, while the girl recalled the girls who had always been by Williams's side. She had some ideas in her mind. Chapter 383. Young warriors, today is the day to pursue your dreams. After half a year of continuous promotion, the long-awaited Challengers Cup finally opened today. Whether it was the contestants or the spectators who came from afar, it had reached an all-time high. The attention of the higher-ups of various countries was also attracted. The special approval of the first years added fuel to the fire of this lively event. The Challengers Cup preliminaries were held in more than 10 locations selected from the numerous secret realms of the scholar country. As for which group was assigned to which location, it was randomly assigned. Just like how everyone's talent in curses would be different, different locations would have a huge impact on a cursemancer, especially the difference between land and water. In the past, among the contestants who drew the maze cliff, there had been situations where some cursemancers who were good at water battles defeated the seeded contestants. The difference in location was the biggest impact, followed by the influence of equipment in the unrestricted spell ranking battles. After that, there were people like Luoya who had special bloodlines or special spells. They might be able to display more shocking strength in certain aspects than their opponents who were at level 3 of the source rank. In Luoya's case, he didn't even make it into the top 10. From this, it could be seen that the rankings were quite exaggerated. However, this was also related to the fact that Luoya didn't go all out during his time in the academy. Under the nervous gaze of the crowd, the spell power of the image finally dissipated and finally stopped at a dark area. Oh no, I've never been to the swamp. Such situations were repeated as the locations were announced. Soon, it was Luoya's turn to be in the 6th group. Why is it that damn place? Hearing the 6th group's location, Luoya's side burst into an uproar. The students who had already formed cliques had ugly expressions after hearing the news. Some of the more timid ones even began to shrink back. The black-haired boy could understand this. After all, the Temple of Silence wasn't very popular. There were skeletons among Shia's monsters, so naturally, there were also things like ghosts. Generally speaking, the probability of these things appearing naturally in peacetime was very low. Luoya had never seen them before because the country he lived in dealt with them well. That's it. Amidst the noisy crowd, Luoya quietly listened to the elimination matches of all the groups. Apart from him, the others seemed to be normal. After the selection of the venues was completed, the tens of thousands of contestants left the venue under the guidance of the staff. They began to move toward the entrance of the secret territory. The curtains of the preliminary round finally opened amidst the cheers of the audience. In the country of scholars, many students had the misconception that the nearby secret realm belonged to the country of scholars. However, this idea was wrong. The Temple of Silence was rumored to be the old site of an ancient civilization, but no one knew exactly what civilization it was. After countless years of erosion, almost no clues could be found, which was why it was casually used as a competition venue. Chapter 384. At the edge of the forest and the ruins, the black-haired young man who was wrapped in yellow curses stared at the brown-haired girl in front of him, dumbfounded. On the other side, Selena held a long sword in her hand, not knowing what to do. The lawless origin substance gave Selena a spear that could break through all curses, but no matter how good the weapon was, it was useless if one didn't know how to use it. That was why the Batet family's battle power was actually driven by two cores. One was the origin substance, and the other was the bloodline of a sacred beast from ancient times. But what if one of them was removed? In the past, only Selena's father could suppress the restless bloodline in the girl's body with absolute strength, allowing Selena to enjoy a period of peace. That was why when her bloodline was suppressed and her brain suddenly became clear, Selena blurted out the word, "father." But soon, the girl realized that something was wrong. There was no need for the help of medicine, and there was no pain. Her bloodline calmed down in an instant, and it was at the moment when Selena's battle intent was at its strongest and she was about to swing her sword. In this situation, the biggest possibility was that the other party's bloodline was the same as hers, and far superior to hers. "No, that's impossible. What did you do? How did it feel to be called father all of a sudden?" "It was quite sudden. It was probably because of the advice of the goddess of fate." "I felt a familiar aura, so I came out to take a look. I didn't expect to find something unexpected." "Is this a bloodline of the same kind?" "Yes, this little girl has the bloodline of a sacred beast." The black-haired young man was stunned when he heard Pei Tila's words. He didn't expect that even a sacred beast could mix with the bloodline of a human. But after thinking about it carefully, he wasn't that surprised. After all, in terms of size and racial differences, William's dragon bloodline was similar. Sensing Luoya's thoughts, Pei Tila gave such an explanation, and Luoya finally understood why Selena was panicking. Looking at Selena, whose hair stood on end when she felt Pei Tila's gaze, Luoya finally understood the current situation. He looked at the girl whose murderous aura had dissipated and finally understood the intention of this advice. Luoya, who was thinking this, looked at the brown-haired girl who was holding a weapon and shaking her tail with a conflicted expression. After thinking for a moment, he spoke with a serious expression. What do you mean?" "If I'm not mistaken, His Highness Williams won't allow you to attack me in the preliminary round. As a transfer student of the Country of Knights and a member of the Dawn Association, Miss Serena, you don't seem to be listening to His Highness Williams' orders." Chapter 385. For the preliminary round, all the contestants and the audience might not be very passionate, but they would never have any worries because it was basically absolutely safe. The excessive damage of the substitute curse vessel did not refer to the severity of the eliminated person's injury, but it referred to the curse power content and strength when the curse vessel was destroyed. For example, Selena's waist slash was more serious than the curse attack of other cursemancers. However, the curse power content and strength were obviously higher than the fireball created by the curse vessel. Although Luoya was very concerned about other people's situation after the preliminary round, he was not worried about the safety of his relatives and friends. Therefore, he was particularly shocked when he heard that Paul was injured in the preliminary round. In the preliminary round of the Challenger Cup, there were not many scenes that the audience could see. After all, there were more than 10 venues where tens of thousands of people were fighting at the same time. It was basically a situation where the smoke of war was everywhere. The venue in the secret realm was too large, so only the most intense battles could be shown to the audience who were excited because of the opening ceremony. In this year's preliminary round, the most broadcast was the 10th group. Therefore, for Paul's advancement, Luoya actually did not have much confidence. The faction did not put any pressure on him. Paul himself also participated in the Challenger Cup with a participation mentality. However, What was unexpected was that the 10th group, which was originally inconspicuous, had someone eyeing him in advance. It was Gelt, one of the two males from the Country of Knights. For the students, when they saw the transfer students from the Country of Knights, they would definitely notice him first, but they would not take a second look at him after that. After all, compared with others, he was really a bit ordinary. However, it was this unattractive guy who became the shocking dark horse in the preliminary round and also became Paul's obstacle. Paul's source substance was the kingdom of the Achaemenid tribe. It could be used as the royal source substance by the Achaemenid tribe, which showed its high quality. However, as the saying goes, cultivation depends on the individual. Even if they had the same source substance, the extraordinary power would develop in different directions according to each person's situation and understanding. It was just like everyone used the same set of textbooks in university, but the papers they wrote were different. As for Paul, he was still a farmer last year. Whether it was his understanding of origin substances or his thoughts, he naturally couldn't reach Lillian's level. But as the main character of the original work, he had his own abilities. With this ability, Paul successfully rushed out of the forest and approached the cave where the advancement crystal was stored. However, he didn't expect to be ambushed by Gelt there. What was even more surprising was Gelt's ability, which was similar to a gigantification curse. Part of the gigantification was indeed awe-inspiring, and the target he wanted to attack was indeed only Paul. However, under the rolling stones, the aftermath of the impact affected many of the top players who had rushed out of the forest. Paul saw this opportunity and had a bright idea. He loudly spread the rumor that Gelt wanted to monopolize the 10 crystals. For a moment, the crowd was agitated, and everyone joined forces to attack Gelt. After listening to the situation of the 10th group, Roja's face turned gloomy. The members of the faction didn't dare to make any noise. They quickly rushed to the entrance of the forest and found that the field was already filled with people lying on the ground. Most of the contestants were injured by the overdose of the poison. What was going on? Why was he so happy when he was injured and eliminated? Brother Luoya. Just now, the referee of the competition came over and told me that they judged that I obtained the crystal to reach the advancement requirement of 10 minutes. After the substitute was damaged, they announced that I successfully advanced. The black-haired teenager widened his eyes when he heard Paul's words. After asking, he knew that Paul had successfully obtained a crystal in the melee and held on for 10 minutes. But before he could leave the field, he was attacked by Gelt's curse power. As a result, his substitute was destroyed, and the aftermath also caused damage to Paul at that time. Listening to the excited noises of the nearby faction members, Luoya breathed a sigh of relief. At the same time, his heart relaxed a lot. He was even happier than when he advanced. Because the significance of this Challenger's Cup was far more important to Paul than others. Paul himself might not have thought of this, but as a friend, Luoya was very clear. Therefore, during this period of time, the teenager focused on training him. But what Luoya didn't expect was that because of the dispute with the Knight's country, Paul actually became one of the targets of the other party, and he was almost eliminated because of it. The teenager with dark clouds in his heart thought so and decided to take action immediately. Chapter 386. After comforting Paul for a while, Luoya heard that it was only a minor injury. After confirming that it would not affect the next match, Luoya immediately began to check the competition list to see if there were other people in the same situation as Paul who encountered the transfer student. As a result, there were 2 matches. This seems to be fine. In the first match, when Noah Iyer and Juliana met, the nature of their curse power determined that Juliana couldn't take advantage of them. Combined with Noah Iyer's own strength, it could be judged that there was no danger. It was better to say that Miss Angel didn't find trouble with them. Luoya knew what was going on in this match. Probably Gerald was running for his life now, but the 2 of them would probably not give the qualification to others. However, after this breakthrough, there were 2 source level 4 people in the Green Rose faction. As the deputy minister, Gerald also became the face of the faction and the department. This competition was a task given by Luoya. He also promised that he would do his best, so there shouldn't be any problems. After looking at the list of people, Luoya sent contact people to these two groups to be on the safe side. Luoya himself went to the venue with Paul and other winners of the primary to register and receive medals. 1 second. Remember 99% elimination rate, this probability could be said to be a real army crossing a single plank bridge. It didn't seem excessive to give a commemorative medal to the players who rushed out. However, when they were registering and receiving the medal, a tall figure made many students, including Paul, change their faces. What is this guy doing? Seeing Gelt approaching, the students around Luoya were a little nervous for a while, but the other party didn't mean to be violent at all. The tall man stopped in front of Luoya and others. He looked at Paul, who was staring at him, and didn't speak. After a moment of silence, he turned his gaze to Luoya. Talk alone. Okay, let's go over there. Mr. Luoya, I heard that the skeleton you used was a giant named Gulandair. Is this true? When the black-haired youth heard Gelt's question, he calmly replied with a question. Mr. Luoya, I'm afraid you don't know this, but the name Gulandair is not glorious in our clan's records. He is a tyrant and a degenerate. He is an extremely evil person. I suggest you cut off all contact with him immediately. Hearing Gelt's words, Luoya's brows wrinkled. He looked at the tall man in front of him, thinking about his words and couldn't help but feel unhappy. That's right. He's a famous criminal in the records of our clan. His name is very special, so it shouldn't be wrong. Fallen ones are good at disguising themselves. You might not know much about him. Hearing the tall man's words, the black-haired youth refuted with a rare look of anger. Geert said in a low voice. Oh, history. I really didn't expect someone to talk about history with our race. Then let me ask you, Mr. Gelt, do you know how much of the history you read is true and how much is false? Chapter 387. After the conflict with Gelt, Luoya calmed down his anger, readjusted his state of mind, and fell into deep thought. Undead creatures were a race that was naturally rejected by humans. Most of them had no sense of reason at all. In ancient times, they were tempted to fall into depravity. There weren't many of them, but the problem was that not all undead creatures were evil, especially the higher-level ones. They were less affected by the undead attribute and could choose their own side. In the distant ancient times, the mythical races were united by the side of the creator, Shia. They were chosen by the creator, and one of them was the undead. If the undead could only do evil, Shia would have wiped them out long ago unless he was a necrophiliac. There were too many possible guesses as to why the Gulandair was described as an evil god who committed all kinds of crimes. The most likely reason was that it was slandered by later generations. However, the specific details would have to be asked by the person involved. After waiting in the venue for nearly an hour, the preliminary round of the dozen groups finally ended. Through the reports of the faction members, Luoya had a general understanding of the situation so far. It could be seen that Juliana was different from Gelt. She didn't carry out Williams's orders well. She was the type who prioritized her own interests. On the other hand, Brittany was even more so. But to a certain extent, she resolutely carried out Williams's orders. Outside the secret realm of Group 12, Jello, who had completed the preliminary round, looked like he was paralyzed. According to the gray-haired young man, Brittany didn't care about the others at all. She chased after him like a mad dog. Jello had been running for more than 3 hours and he knelt on the ground as soon as he came out of the door. As a first-year faction that wasn't qualified to participate in the competition, including Paul who unexpectedly advanced, 3 of the Green Rose members made it into the semifinals. This was undoubtedly exciting. According to Luoya's knowledge, the Nuo Ire and Xia Luo's gold and red factions had gathered so many nobles, but no more than 5 of them made it to the semifinals. Luoya commented as he looked at the excited members of Blue Rose. However, he did not immediately congratulate them as he still had other matters to attend to. The Armor Hall was the name of this building. It was said that it was the residence of an old teacher who was obsessed with knight culture and spirit. After his death, he donated it to St. Freya Academy. The entire hall had more than 100 sets of knight armor and weapons. It could be called a small knight culture museum. Without a doubt, this was a preferential treatment for Williams and the others who didn't participate in the entrance exam and didn't have any actual achievements. The outside world had also criticized this before. However, now that the 7 people from the country of knights had all advanced, these voices of dissatisfaction quickly disappeared. Through the open door, the blonde Brittany was surprised to see the young man outside. Luoya also revealed his purpose. Your Highness Williams, in the preliminary round of the Challengers Cup, the transfer students from the country of knights attacked the contestants from the Green Rose faction. As far as I know, this seems to be your order. Can you explain? It's not against the rules, but as a student of St. Freya Academy, I don't think this kind of internal strife is worth promoting, especially in such an important competition. Facing the black-haired young man's questioning, Williams, who was wearing armor, said so without showing the slightest apology. Instead, he asked Luoya a question. Your Highness Williams, perhaps in your eyes, this method is indeed unfair, but according to the rules of the Challengers Cup, the tournament recognizes and allows friendly students to help each other. In official words, connections and luck are also part of one's strength. In fact, during the tournament, there are indeed student groups that gather with the academy as a unit. Chapter 388. Depraved, Gelt did say this word. When he clashed with Gelt, Luoya ignored some details due to his inner anger. One of them was the meaning of depraved. The youth originally thought that Gelt called the Gulen Daer depraved because of the appearance of the giant skeleton, but after discussing with Pei Tila and others, Luoya suddenly felt something was wrong. Savior. Regarding this question, Pei Tila was silent for a moment before shaking his head, showing a puzzled look. The ancient Mother Earth recalled the past and said so. On the other side, the witch narrowed her scarlet eyes and ridiculed. Witch, are you provoking me? Hearing Pei Tila's angry retort, Altacia exaggeratedly stroked her chest and ran to Luoya's side, then whispered, You're not a princess but a queen, right? And you're the one who provoked me first, right? Facing Luoya's unmoved retort, the white-haired witch showed a dissatisfied expression, while Pei Tila stared at her angrily. After wasting a lot of time, Luoya pulled the conversation back to the main topic. Generally, there are 2 kinds of concepts. One is the depraved gods who pursued power after Shia's death. The other is the pitiful creatures who were influenced by the Savior's depravity. That is the difference between active and passive. After listening to Altacia's words, Luoya couldn't help but ponder. From his subjective point of view, it was impossible for the Gulen Daer to actively deprave when he was alive, and from an objective point of view, this point was also the same. Therefore, the Gulen Daer should be innocent, but the giant's bloodline called him a depraved. Did it mean that his life and even his death had something to do with the Savior? In Shia's history, there weren't many races that liked to record their past in various ways. The giants mostly passed down their history orally, and there was a high probability of mishearing or misunderstanding when passing down a story. By the time someone actually summed up the history in a book, it would probably be long gone. After asking around, Luoya, who didn't get any constructive opinions, dismissed the discussion among the gods. He decided to find a way to search for books in this area in the future. After a rest, the teenager walked out of the room and went to the banquet hall to prepare for the celebration. As a result, he saw Paul, who was wearing a strange armor, explaining something to the onlookers. Oh, the patterns on it are so beautiful. Luoya, who was well versed in history, had heard of the Forest Legion of the ancient Austin Empire. It was formed during the Empire's most powerful period, mainly to deal with the beast tide in the forest area of the Empire. In the early days of the Empire, humans adopted a defensive war, hoarding food and closing the city. But with the development of the Empire, the expansion of the soldiers, the improvement of weapons and equipment, and strength, people gradually didn't want to take a defensive position. Every year, they were besieged for 1 or 2 months. The Forest Legion was born to turn defense into offense. This was the first time in human history that the large-scale beast tide, which was rated as the same level as natural disasters such as floods and earthquakes in the past, was successfully eliminated. There was no doubt that it was a milestone and a symbol of the peak of human civilization. However, it could also be said to be the peak of the ancient Austen Empire. The stories of heroes were no longer told by people. The descendants of the frontier knights gradually became addicted to sensual pleasures, and the pursuit of fame and fortune became the goal of the later generations. Humans lost their unity and became a pile of loose sand amidst the increasingly intense internal strife. All kinds of corruption began to proliferate, and in the end, the entire empire became rotten. When the ancestors of Ald watched the glory of the empire fade in the dark, what kind of feelings did they have in their hearts? Forest fairies, the name of this armor should be given by the designer at that time according to the fairy tales of the fairies who came and went without a trace in the forest. But in Luo Ye's ears, it was very strange, especially when the young boy saw Paul doing bodybuilding exercises to show off his muscle-strengthening ability. Oh. This kind of camouflage can be activated while moving? He felt that something was wrong. What exactly was it? Wait a minute, in the original work, Paul did summon this armor, but that was when he was close to the 3rd year, right? How could it be so fast in the real world? If he thought about it this way, it seemed that his speed of improvement was also much faster. After Luo Ye's actions were different from the original work, everyone in the eye of the recorder seemed to have improved faster than the original work. They were already favored by the heavens, but they became more and more demonic. Luo Ye didn't know how to explain this. The young boy blinked and fell into deep thought. On the other side, as students from other departments in the academy came to visit, Paul's side also became noisy. Student Paul. We are the Curse Research Department belonging to the Curse School. Can you let us take a closer look at this perfect armor? Looking at the members of various departments in the academy, the young boy who suddenly became a dark horse in the Challenger Cup competition didn't know what to do for a while. The nearby faction members were also unprepared. Facing the outsiders who kept making requests, Paul became a little embarrassed. Students from various departments visiting, please abide by the order of Tsang Hall. As a participant of the Green Rose faction, Paul Aikman is currently not accepting any interviews. His spell and equipment are also confidential matters before the end of the competition. Please understand. Seeing that one of the ring-bearers, Luo Ye, came forward, the students who made all kinds of outrageous requests stopped and dispelled the idea of making a big news. The crowd gradually dispersed. Paul, who was relieved, looked at the young boy in front of him who blocked the crowd for him. He felt warm in his heart and hurriedly thanked him. It's normal. Most people are like this when they are suddenly surrounded. It will be fine after a while. Can you let others wear this thing? Hearing Luo Ye's question, Paul smiled bitterly, then explained, I see. The magical weapon of the ancient Austen Empire in the Second Era was the achievements of most of the top curse research in human history. If it could be successfully replicated by Paul, it would be of great significance to promote the current curse equipment, especially now when the mutants were restless. After asking Luo Ye at the award ceremony not long ago, Melty proved that she was not joking. She really joined the Green Rose faction. As a senior and one of the members of the Academy's orchestra, the talented girl with good temperament was warmly welcomed and quickly integrated into the group. As an outsider of the Academy, Elisa wasn't allowed to live in the Blue Hall. This was because it would violate the Academy's rules. Usually, it would be fine if she was only a member of the faction and no one would speak of this matter. But today, a large group of outsiders had come, so it would be very dangerous for Elisa to show her face. The helpless young boy took a sip of wine and celebrated with Paul and Gerlach. However, to his surprise, Paul didn't eat and drink as usual at today's banquet. Instead, he looked a little strange. Senior. Junior Luo Ye, I'm here as the representative of the Aikman family. Thank you for your help to family member Paul Aikman. Because the Purple Rose faction's banquet has just ended, it seems that I didn't have time to inform you in advance. Please forgive me. The black-haired young boy said with a smile on his face. He cooperated well with Lillian's official tone. In the eyes of outsiders, it was completely polite. As for Paul, the agent didn't participate in the conversation between the two. He just pulled a chair and put it next to Luoya's seat. You can actually use the kingdom source substance like this. This is really beyond my expectation. Your situation is also very rare in the history of our family. Listening to the question and answer between Lillian and Paul, Luoya, who couldn't interrupt, raised his eyebrows. After thinking for a moment, the young boy turned his head and wanted to chat with Gerlach, but before he could speak, the tentative fingers under the table suddenly touched him. In the lively banquet under everyone's gaze, the black-haired girl smiled and held the young boy's hand dexterously. Chapter 389. Amidst the lively banquet, Luoya stared at the gray-haired young man with widened eyes. On the other hand, Gerlach looked dubious. He naturally didn't know what kind of heartbeat Luoya was going through at that moment. "Head, what's wrong? Why is your face so red?" "Oh, I see. It has indeed gotten hotter in the past few days." As the person who was the furthest away from Luoya geographically, Lillian could only spend time with the young man in the academy and couldn't see him in public. This could be considered a major disadvantage. But Lillian also had her own advantages. She had Paul as a top-notch insider. In a situation where the other young ladies couldn't attend due to faction affairs, Lillian arrived first as Paul's relative. The feeling of sneaking ahead was undoubtedly exhilarating, especially under the watchful eyes of everyone. Before this, as her XP was triggered, Lillian could do whatever she wanted to Luoya, whose side effects were reduced. But now, the side effects were gone forever. Facing the young man in his normal state, Lillian didn't have the courage to be too proactive. But compared to the passion back then, the warmth between the two of them was enjoyable. Remember this for a second. The black-haired young lady felt this rare happiness. Her purple pupils couldn't help but narrow slightly. She knew that she shouldn't laugh so casually, but the corners of her mouth couldn't help but curl up. And in the eyes of Paul, who was covering for her, this change was even more obvious. It was a peculiar feeling similar to virtuousness and even a strong maternal instinct. It was an unknown side of her that would only be revealed when she was with Luoya. It was also due to this obvious change that Paul volunteered to be the go-between between Lillian and Luoya. Gazing at the two of them sitting side by side, Paul revealed a smile and lamented. After his discussion with Lillian about the source substance, the nearby crowd had left as if avoiding suspicion. Gerlach had also gone out to drink with his close friends. With no one around, the young lady could finally whisper to Luoya. "Thank you, Senior. You too. Did the preliminary round go well?" The black-haired girl said regretfully. She was still brooding over the fact that she had drawn the grassland terrain in the preliminary round. Luoya couldn't help but laugh. He couldn't help but open his mouth to persuade her. "If that's the case, things will be a little difficult." Upon hearing Lillian's unexpected answer, Luoya couldn't help but blink in confusion. The black-haired girl smiled, gently clenched his hand, and whispered in his ear. The girl, whose wish wasn't fulfilled, could only tap Luoya's wrist under the table. Then, she couldn't help but sigh. "If it's just meeting each other, we can do it every day during class. However, we haven't had many opportunities to meet in private recently." The reason was that as the leader of the faction, they needed to lead the other members of the faction to improve together with them to a certain extent. It felt like a top student helping to tutor others. The improvement of the overall strength of the faction was also an important test for the ring-bearers. "Senior sister, Green Rose has just started and needs to improve as a whole to get resources, so I've been quite busy recently." Chapter 390. After 2 rounds of easy matches, the seeded players of the Challengers Cup had basically cleared the contestants with average strength, and Luoya was about to face the agreed battle. To some extent, Luoya, who also had some bloodline problems, understood Selina's feelings very well. But on the other hand, the teenager opposed Selina's solution to the bloodline problem. The Batet family's sacred beast bloodline could be controlled. Luoya had learned this in advance, but the opportunity to control the bloodline was different. Some people naturally learned it as they grew older, and some people learned it in battles with strong enemies. Selina's bloodline talent was extremely high, so it was estimated that the latter was the most likely to control the bloodline. If he wanted to help her, he had to defeat her. This competition was the best opportunity because the substitute curse vessel of this Challengers Cup competition could let people clearly experience death. The state between life and death was the closest to a real battle. In the crowded arena, Luoya and Selina were at one end of the arena. In the center, the crystal ball in the hands of the tournament organizer, which constantly changed the venue, lit up again, making the audience excited. Under such a battle analysis, the venue selection became the focus of the audience. However, as if God was playing a joke on Luoya, at the last moment when the constantly changing venue crystal ball reached the finish line, the hilly terrain that was originally quite good was replaced before it was locked, turning into a dark rainforest. 1 second remember, 50 gold coins. Bet on that little girl. With the efforts of the majority of gamblers, Luoya's odds began to soar. At one end of the arena, the silver-haired girl frowned worriedly. It's very simple. Because the darkness of this secret realm, perpetual night forest, is accompanied by curse power, ordinary night vision spells are very ineffective. TSK, I didn't expect to draw such a place. Should I say that things don't go as planned? Perhaps a few months ago, Luoya would have some concerns about dueling with Selina in such a place, but now it was different because Luoya no longer had 2 ancient gods, but 3. After the announcement of the entrance was made, Luoya and Selina's bodies were surrounded by light. When they opened their eyes again, the black-haired teenager saw complete darkness. After officially entering the competition, Luoya found that the situation in the perpetual night forest was worse than expected. Facing such an unfavorable environment, Luoya did not move a step, nor did he use any spells. Instead, he immediately chose to release the Hydra staff in his hand. The origin form, disorder, gave Luoya a strong penetrative ability. This was the thing that had left the deepest impression on him in the previous 2 matches. Under this ability that almost ignored defense, 2 strong contestants had been killed in a single blow. However, after carefully studying the principle behind it, Luoya found that the Hydra staff could still be used. With the full infusion of curse power, the Hydra staff emitted a sparkling light. 9 intimidating snakes emerged from the staff and surrounded the teenager as if he was a king. Then, a defensive rock wall emitting a pale yellow curse power was erected at the outermost periphery. In Luoya's eyes, this was the battle that had the hope of reversing the situation of Selina's bloodline. In the girl's eyes, this battle was even more crucial because her strong beast instinct told her that Luoya was the strongest opponent she had ever encountered. Although they had not met for long, as one of the few people who had spoken to her when her bloodline had calmed down, Luoya understood her thoughts and promised to fight with all his strength. What was even rarer was that this arena seemed to be tailor-made for Selina. Passionate hot blood flowed through her body along with the determination to fight. Her holy beast bloodline was stimulated to the limit by Selina at this moment. With the crisp sound of bones cracking, beast ears and a tail appeared on the girl's body. Her eyes flashed with a bestial light, and the noise in her brain increased. This battle was almost impossible for Luoya to launch an attack. Selina, who had the advantage of the geographical advantage, had long known this. Before entering the arena, the brown-haired girl had predicted that Luoya would adopt a defensive strategy, so she had thought of a strategy in advance. Clear beastly cries continuously sounded from the girl's mouth. Under the deterrence of a holy beast's aura, the magical creatures in the forest began to submit and move under Selina's command. That is too strong. The outcome of this battle is already decided. As expected of the Batet family's once-in-a-century genius, to be able to mobilize so many magical creatures in such a short period of time. The judges of the competition began to express their opinions, and almost all of them thought that Luoya was at a serious disadvantage. However, at the highest point of the ceremonial stage, Antonio, who was listening to the official's high-pitched speech, had a different expression in his eyes. The old man looked at the youth in the arena and blinked, then smiled after a moment. The roars of magical creatures sounded from all directions, and Pei-Tila's outermost defense began to be attacked from all directions. Due to the number of magical creatures, the Hydra protecting Luoya had no choice but to move its huge body and spray its venom outwards. For a moment, the roars and screams of magical creatures filled the air. After the magical creatures in the sky moved, the Hydra could no longer maintain a complete defense. At this moment, the black-haired youth had no choice but to make a move. Against Luoya, who had the king of sacred beasts following him, the magical creatures were completely useless. This was something that Selena already knew. However, even though the magical creatures weren't a threat, they could still cause him to reveal his flaws. The moment Pei-Tila's aura intimidated the magical creatures, the brown-haired young lady in the darkness suddenly activated her bloodline. At this moment, the curse power in Selena's body was like an explosive, violently reacting in a way that was close to self-harming. The brown-haired young lady was only a few hundred meters away from Luoya in the blink of an eye. The young lady's body fell to the ground like a meteor, consecutively chopping off 2 snake heads and pouncing towards the youth in the center of the formation. It was as if she had taken the head of a general in the midst of thousands of soldiers. At this moment, Luoya seemed to have recovered from his shock. Looking at the astonished youth under the long sword, Selena was almost certain that she had won. However, the next scene that happened made her widen her eyes in shock. Not good. He hasn't lost yet. The all-out attack of both sides clashed head-on just like that. At the next moment, the collision of the curse power shook the entire secret realm, erupting with extreme sound and light. The loud sound of the explosion shook the atmosphere and turned it into a shockwave. The intense light illuminated the forest as if it was daytime. The nocturnal monsters screamed in this upheaval, and the audience outside the arena also exclaimed. "That's..." The silver-haired young lady cheered happily in the audience. After a moment of judgment and verification, the tournament referees announced on the screen. "Oh. In the arena, the black-haired youth looked at the young lady who had collapsed to the ground due to excessive damage and the exhaustion of her curse power and asked her how she felt. "Are you satisfied? As expected, you purposely attacked me in the end, right?" The black-haired youth said in a flat tone. Selena smiled and narrowed her eyes. Somehow, she felt that he wasn't that annoying. "I feel like I'm full all of a sudden. I don't want to fight anymore." "You can say that." The excited spectators became even noisier after seeing the return of the 2 contestants. They raised their hands and applauded for the final all-out collision between the 2 contestants. The medical staff rushed forward and lifted Selena onto a stretcher. Luoya was required to undergo a post-match examination according to the rules. "I've fulfilled my promise, haven't I?" Thinking so, the black-haired youth looked at Selena in the distance and revealed a smile. But what surprised him was that at this moment, the system prompt suddenly sounded. Chapter 391. Ding, don't refuse AI Lizzie Kat's request tonight. Tonight, I can't refuse AI Lizzie's request. N. Previously, the small suggestions generated by the blessing of the goddess of fate were within the scope of what he could implement. It wouldn't have much impact if he followed the suggestions, but this time, don't refuse AI Lizzie's request. This is definitely not okay. Forget it, let's take one step at a time. 1 second. Remember, without the substitute curse vessel being completely damaged, Luoya hardly suffered any substantial damage, so he just checked it a little and left. The young man who walked out of the arena was warmly welcomed by the faction members, and he learned one thing. That was, his odds had skyrocketed. As a result, Luoya's odds rose all the way until the beginning of the game. Such high odds made Luoya, who heard about it, stunned. He almost burst into tears for a while. As a seeded player, Luoya's usual odds were only about 1/3, which was pitifully low. This was also the reason why he didn't bet on winning or negative betting time. Thinking that he had tripled more than 100,000 gold coins in one game, Luoya was excited for a while. Judging from this situation, he might be able to pay back the money he owed Xia Luot before the Challenger Cup ended. Now the tournament had reached the top 32. The transfer students of the country of knights and Luoya's acquaintances had not been eliminated yet. Even the weakest Paul actually survived 2 rounds with his ability to summon divine armament. The ocean field was generally considered a neutral field. After all, most people had no experience in ocean battles. Originally, the opponent thought that this kind of field was very disadvantageous for both sides. He could win with stronger strength. As a result, he didn't expect Paul to change armor on the spot. He directly transformed into the ancient Austin Empire Navy and exhausted his opponent to death with the advantage of the field and equipment. For Paul's situation, Luoya could only say that he was lucky. He even suspected that this guy had activated some kind of protagonist aura. In contrast, Gerlach on the other side was much more difficult. Although he successfully survived 2 rounds, both rounds were tough battles. For example, in the last street battle, Xia Luot's opponent was a cursemancer who was good at large-scale attack spells. The bloodline ability was to hide the spell fluctuations to a certain extent. After discovering that Xia Luot's golden soul was good at defense, the top student trained by Leinster College decided to hide and make a big move. He wanted to win with full power, but he didn't expect to be attacked at the beginning. Compared with Xia Luot's slightly more interesting game, Noah Iyer and Lillian were somewhat similar. They directly defeated their opponents with their strength. As for the transfer students, they each had their own characteristics. Among them, the most eye-catching one was Teresa. She defeated her opponents with spells in both elimination rounds. This year's Challengers Cup was amazing because of the outstanding performance of the first years. Roja and the others led the faction cadres and the transfer students. Out of the 100 or so people who passed the preliminaries, nearly 20 of them made it to the Challengers Cup. In the top 32, they made it to the Challengers Cup. In Shia, the teaching of different places was not uniform. The teaching content of St. Fran Academy in the country of knights and St. Freya Academy in the country of scholars was very different. This led to the situation where 7 people had to start from the first year. For example, Gelt, who had the giant's bloodline, was actually already a 3rd year at St. Fran Academy. Before the arrival of Luoya, these 2 ring-bearers had always followed Purple Rose Lillian's lead. Grimm himself was born in the Austin Empire. Because he believed in the pure blood theory, he became a hardcore supporter of Lillian. Edward, on the other hand, was born in a small country in the buffer zone of the Austin Empire. Naturally, he didn't dare to disobey Her Royal Highness, who might become the next emperor. This time, the 2 ring-bearers also entered the top 32. Edward was the 2nd-seeded player. He was very calm in the previous 2 battles and was generally favored by the outside world. Paul met Juliana in the 3rd round. This beautiful girl with black hair and red eyes had a far better understanding of dark spells than her level. She was completely at the master level. However, as a conjurer from the country of knights, Juliana naturally had an additional layer of warrior attributes. Her weapon was an ominous heavy sword. However, this girl who seemed to be a vampire was obviously not a pretty face. In the battle with Paul, Juliana's luck was not good. When she drew the venue, she drew the rainforest, which was the most suitable venue for Paul's forest sprite armor. However, what everyone did not expect was that Juliana's curse talent was even more powerful. This kind of wide area search spell was actually not very powerful in terms of spell power, but its operation difficulty was too high. Generally speaking, it required several conjurers to cooperate to complete it. However, Juliana completed it alone with ease. The moment she caught Paul, she performed shadow shift and appeared behind him. Then, her greatsword flashed and cut Paul in half. Obviously, the protagonist's halo wasn't as magical as imagined in the real world. Although Paul was lucky all the way and even drew the best lot in the venue, luck wasn't omnipotent. Juliana proved with facts that strength was always the most reliable. TSK, what kind of smell is this? After Paul's defeat, another deputy minister of the Blue Rose faction also met with a defeat. However, Luoya was not surprised because Gerlach's opponent was Brittany. The gray-haired youth's legs were shaking as soon as he entered the arena. It would be strange if he could win. Rather than letting others kill him, why not let me do it? Gerlach's guts were shattered when he heard Brittany's words. He was even more convinced that there was something wrong with Brittany's mind. However, based on Luoya's experience, she was probably just not good at language. Under Brittany's threat, the cowardly Gerlach was defeated like a landslide. However, to be honest, this did not have much of an impact on the outcome. In terms of strength alone, Brittany, who had the bloodline of the Valkyrie, could not be defeated by a youth who had just reached level 4 of source rank. In that battle, Stuart drew the desert terrain. His opponent was a foreign participant who had rich combat experience. Both of them were at level 4 of source rank. Then, there was a series of spells that were nothing special but very solid. In the end, Stuart lost. Even after his defeat, he did not take off the black cloth covering his eyes. Could it be that his eyes were not used for battle? Although Luoya advanced to the top 16, Paul and Gerlach had just been eliminated, so it was inappropriate to celebrate. In fact, after returning to the residence, Luoya specially consoled them. After realizing the gap in strength between them and their opponents, they both expressed that they would work harder. After chatting with them, Luoya finally had some free time. However, a question arose in his mind. AI Lizzie did not return with him. Instead, she left with teacher Chris before the end of the competition. Luoya returned to his private area with doubts. He did not expect to hear the sound of firecrackers as soon as he opened the door to the dining hall. Big brother. Congratulations on your successful advancement. The black-haired boy stared at the two people who were firing the cannons and shooting out colorful paper ribbons. Chris smiled and explained, "That's right. I really didn't expect this. I've never seen this dish before. This is... You guys?" Looking at the silver-haired girl who patted her chest and asked for praise, Luoya was stunned for a while. He looked at the dish in front of him, and his heart was filled with emotions. Thinking of this, Luoya suddenly felt like crying. In order to cover it up, he hurriedly picked up the spoon and took a sip. "It's delicious." Hearing AI Lizzie's question, Luoya answered decisively, just like any parent who ate a dish cooked by their child for the first time. But after speaking, the youth found that AI Lizzie's dish was really delicious. Under the dual psychological and physical enjoyment, Luoya drank nearly half of the soup in one breath. AI Lizzie was very happy to see this, and Chris couldn't help but laugh. "So that's how it is. At that time, I wanted to make it for your father, but I didn't have the chance to learn it. I didn't expect that after so many years, it's actually yours." Hearing Chris's complaint, the black-haired youth didn't know whether to laugh or cry. At the same time, seizing the opportunity when Luoya was touched, AI Lizzie hugged the youth's arm and said her request. "Big brother, can you let me stay tonight?" Chapter 392. At the dining table, AI Lizzie seized the opportunity to make a request decisively, while Chris on the other side squinted his eyes and cheered for her in his heart. This time, the behavior of the two was not on the spur of the moment, but they really came prepared. After all, Luoya would advance, and it was not difficult to predict that Paul and others would be eliminated. For this reason, AI Lizzie began to practice with Chris a week ago. Under the pleading of AI Lizzie, Luoya, who was moved in his heart, agreed almost instantly. After agreeing, the young man remembered the advice of the goddess, and he couldn't help but smile bitterly in his heart. The puzzled young man decided to wait and see, and put these things behind him for the time being. Chris, on the other hand, talked about Dia's reply. Well, looking at the date, it was 3 months ago. She said that she thanked me for taking care of you, but to be honest, I don't think I did anything. Are you praising me? Remember it in 1 second. If it was according to Dad's thinking, it should be just a polite reply now. The relationship with Teacher Chris is probably still at the level of old friends. In this case, Teacher Chris still has a long way to go. Under the company of AI Lizzie and Chris, the young man rarely experienced the warmth of a family. After a warm dinner, Chris found an opportunity to give AI Lizzie a look and got up to leave, so only Luoya and AI Lizzie were left in the room. However, it had to be said that Luoya really needed to read some books recently to stabilize his extraordinary power. After all, after the last historical fragment, his strength had advanced by leaps and bounds, and he was close to the limit of source rank 4. However, this kind of leap in progress had an unstable foundation, and an inappropriate consolidation was likely to cause problems. In order to achieve this goal, Luoya needed a lot of historical records to enrich himself. If he was in the Akkad family, it might be a little difficult, but fortunately, he was in St. Freya Academy, and he really couldn't finish reading the resources in the library in a short time. No matter if it was a history book from hundreds of years ago or a scroll from thousands of years ago, no matter if it was a strange story or a serious history, as long as Luoya was by her side, AI Lizzie didn't care. After all, rather than saying that she was reading a book, it was better to say that she was reading a person. Beside the sofa where the lamp was lit, Luoya and the silver-haired girl were sitting side by side. The boy was holding a thick book and slowly flipping through it, while the girl was silently rubbing against his shoulder like a cat. This familiar feeling made Luoya's heart relax. He felt as if he was in the mansion of Akkad Hill. Really, this aspect hasn't changed at all. Since he was a child, Luoya had discovered this characteristic of AI Lizzie. If the girl was divided into liberal arts and science, AI Lizzie was undoubtedly an all-rounder talent. Subjects like mathematics that gave many girls headaches were not difficult at all in AI Lizzie's eyes. Liberal arts and the like were also a piece of cake for her. She was a standard top student. Under this long-term tacit understanding, Luoya and AI Lizzie didn't discuss anything and just snuggled up to each other for a few hours. When it was close to midnight, a strange spell began to come from afar. Juliana felt that she was going to starve to death. As a student of St. Freya Academy, the so-called hunger naturally didn't refer to the hunger of ordinary people due to lack of food, but in fact, it was the cost of using the spell on her body. The Blood Tribe was a famous race in Shia's ancient times. But compared to other mythical creatures, the Blood Tribe's origin was noble, but their body wasn't that different from humans. Therefore, they could reproduce with humans through ordinary reproduction. Chapter 393. That night, due to the unexpected arrival of the girl, AI Lizzie did not make any excessive requests to Luoya. Instead, she chased her away and went to sleep. That's right. For the current Luoya, sleeping in separate beds was already within her expectations. Fortunately, nothing unexpected happened throughout the night. When she woke up the next morning and felt the girl lying on her chest, Luoya even felt a trace of familiarity. Is it because I haven't seen AI Lizzie for half a year? After the elimination of Selena, the Challengers Cup competition entered its most heated stage. The strongest contestants began their final battle, and St. Freya Academy inevitably began its internal strife. Even the transfer students from the Kingdom of Knights had to face off against their own people one by one. After that, Luoya still did not leave. Instead, she continued to watch the competition and quickly confirmed her next opponent, Gelt. After Gelt transformed into his giant form, he blasted all the trees into the sky with a heavy punch. Juliana completely lost the shadow that she relied on to move. She could only helplessly meet force with force, and naturally, she was defeated by Gelt's iron fist. Gelt. Gelt! Gelt! In the midst of the thunderous cheers, the tall man waved his hand and then turned his gaze to Luoya, who was in the audience seat of the Blue Rose Academy. The two of them looked at each other, their eyes cold and filled with battle intent. Will the versatile summoner Luoya emerge victorious, or will the ancient bloodline giant Gelt continue his glory? The hottest competition of the Challengers Cup. Everyone, please place your bets. Time slowly passed in the midst of the burning fighting spirit of the two sides until the day of the competition. After a few days of rest, in the Leinster Battle Arena, the competition that had been hyped by various merchants for nearly a week finally began. As the two sides of the battle, the two of them did not communicate because they understood each other's stubbornness. Words alone would not be able to resolve the dispute between the two of them. Luoya even felt that words might be more effective against these giant bloodline users. The ninth field, Ash Desert. The Ash Desert was a terrain just like the literal meaning of its name. In the whole secret realm, there were only flying ashes similar to ashes after being burned and the sand of the desert terrain. There was no cover at all to hide. In this place, the two sides could only pursue and fight head-on. Under the expectant gaze of the audience, Luoya and Gelt entered the arena. After the baptism of dust and sand, the two figures appeared separately in the open desert, separated by thousands of meters. Gelt's bloodline came from the giants, but his origin substance wasn't the common power of the giants. Instead, it was trace. And just as the name implied, the Gust race's supernatural strength was, to a certain extent, traced back to the origin of their bloodline, which was the history of the giants. In order to gain more power, the Gust race had spent a lot of effort in researching this aspect, and the Gulen Daer was one of the discoveries they made during their research. On both sides of the desert, Luoya and Gelt didn't talk nonsense as they immediately unleashed their full strength. Chapter 394. After finishing his battle with Gelt, Luoya's mood improved a lot after hearing Gelt's last words. The anger that was caused by the Gulen Daer being discredited had mostly dissipated. What? Princess Noa Ayer wants to forfeit? Forfeit? Noa Ayer. Although the importance of the Challengers Cup to princesses like Noa Ayer and Xia Luot was much lower than others, the publicity effect was unparalleled. Moreover, it was already the semi-final stage, how could they forfeit? Luoya was puzzled and asked his own question. He didn't expect the female student to be troubled after hearing his question. What? Well, you guys can leave. In the classical and elegant living room, a blonde girl sat alone at the tea table by the balcony. She dismissed the aristocrats in the room and smiled at the approaching youth. Well, I beat up that arrogant guy. But that's not important. I heard that you want to forfeit, what's the matter? Angels were the embodiment of holiness in ancient times. Noa Ayer who possessed the blood of an angel shouldn't have any abnormalities. Once there was a problem, it would be a big problem. Noa Ayer, what's the matter? Nostalgia? Noa Ayer's face revealed a smile as she recalled the similar historical situation she experienced with the youth. Luoya was surprised when he heard this. He stared at the girl and asked. Well, the blood is restless. Maybe it's about to advance to gold. Hearing Noa Ayer's answer, Luoya couldn't help but widen his eyes. A strange feeling suddenly welled up in his heart. The youth's heart was filled with doubts. Not only did his worries not lessen, but it began to increase instead. Because the advancement of the blood was different from the extraordinary level, it may cause the body to be unable to bear it. In fact, Noa Ayer's condition when she was younger was because she was too young when she advanced. Now that she was advancing to gold, would the situation be more serious? Chapter 395. Although the exchange with Noa Ayer was heartwarming, the recent series of events around him made Luoya feel slightly uneasy. However, it had to be said that the doubts in the young man's heart were not supported by any actual situation and seemed to be groundless fears. Soon after, Noa Ayer's decision was made public by the tournament organizers. The Challengers Cup was not just a material reward. The winner would also receive great fame. This kind of fame transcended national boundaries and had a huge impact on a person's future. Fortunately, the people of the theocracy still had a hope, and that was Luoya of the Akot family. After becoming the only contestant from his country, the young man gained a large number of supporters out of thin air. Noah Ayer's incident had a great impact on the tournament, but no one expected that the incident would be overshadowed by an even more explosive piece of news just one day later. Edward of the Grey Rose, who was one of the favorites to win the tournament and ranked second among the seeded contestants, was defeated by Williams. The Heart's Sword was unleashed by Williams for the first time in this match. Its effect was shocking, especially the final scene where the blade flew like a meteor and broke through Edward's heavy defense to cut him in half. This caused the audience to cheer. The second level 3 source level contestant in this year's Challengers Cup. Such news almost instantly caused an uproar in the entire tournament because this was the first time there were 2 level 3 source level contestants in the same tournament since the Challengers Cup was held. Under such an atmosphere, phrases such as Genius Knight began to appear one after another. Williams' name caused a great uproar, and his popularity soared like a rocket. He became the favorite to win the tournament. Xiao Luo's golden soul could attack and defend freely, but in the face of overwhelming numbers, it did not have enough destructive power. Although Xiao Luo's gem curse could make up for this, it was obviously inferior to Lilian's summoning speed. Perhaps due to the relationship between the two countries, Luoya could see that Lilian did not go all out in this battle. Instead, she used a battle of attrition to achieve victory. However, after this last match, the top 4 contestants of the Challengers Cup were officially decided. These 4 extraordinaires were about to compete for the honor of being at the top of the younger generation. But in Roja's eyes, this was especially strange because from his point of view, this was a match between siblings. Thus, under the gazes of everyone in the arena, the 4 of them began to draw lots for their fates. However, the results left the audience both happy and worried. Group 1, Group 2, when such a result appeared on the screen, the battle arena was in an uproar. The audience of Saint Maester cheered in surprise, cheering for Luoya's luck. The audience of the theocracy was excited, as were the members of the Blue Rose faction and the supporters of Luoya. On the other side, the fans and students of the Austin Empire, as well as the audience who supported Williams, were somewhat worried. After all, no matter how they looked at it, the opponent who was also at the 3rd level of the source rank was a strong opponent. Before the final match, Lilian naturally did not want to fight with Luoya. On the other hand, the match with Lilian was exactly what Williams wanted. After all, she participated in the Challengers Cup to prove that she was stronger than the people around Luoya. The moment she passed by Luoya before leaving the arena, Lilian said so to him in an imperceptible voice. The young man smiled. After drawing lots to determine the number of matches, the 4 final contestants left the arena respectively. The battle arena was sent off with cheers and applause. Everyone knew that no matter who won or lost, they would definitely become the leaders of the younger generation. I'll be leaving first. Remember to bring the trophy with you when you come back. Chapter 396. Under the dim light of the butterfly dance pavilion, the reddish-brown-haired girl's emerald eyes narrowed slightly, and a blush appeared on her delicate face. She stretched out her slender white hand and gently placed it on the boy's chest. Her fingers intertwined as she measured Luoya's chest. Is it itchy? Looking at the young lady who mistakenly thought that her actions had tickled the boy, Luoya turned his head and denied. Xia Luo raised her eyes and stared at the boy in front of her for a while. Suddenly, she narrowed her eyes as if she had understood something. Not only did she not retreat, she instead took a step forward. With a teasing smile on her face, the reddish-brown-haired girl once again stretched out her hand and pointed at the boy's chest. Inch by inch, she began to measure his chest, but this time, the young lady was no longer focused on measuring. Instead, she seemed to unintentionally lean on the boy's body. "What's wrong, dear?" The boy who didn't know what to say was silent for a moment. He could only turn his face away again, but he didn't expect Xia Luo's warm breath to suddenly hit his neck again. The boy who was complaining in his heart resisted the throbbing in his heart. On the other side, the reddish-brown-haired young lady was getting more and more excited. She observed Luo Ya's increasingly red cheeks and resisted the urge to laugh. Unfortunately, it didn't take long for this heart-stirring prank to be discovered. Xia Luo, is this the way to measure your chest? Looking at the young lady who was smiling in all seriousness, Luo Ya nodded with conviction and then said. The black-haired boy took a step forward and hooked Xia Luo's slender waist. Before the reddish-brown-haired girl could react, he approached her and began to breathe into the girl's small ear. The effect was extremely obvious. The girl who was suddenly attacked let out a short scream, but Luo Ya didn't stop. After enduring for a moment, Xia Luo had no choice but to open her mouth and beg for mercy. I was wrong, dear, please forgive me, the reddish-brown-haired girl who was attacked cried out in alarm. However, the boy who was teased for a long time didn't buy it. Under this playfulness, Xia Luo's body became more and more limp, her cheeks flushed, and her breathing quickened until a sudden sound was heard. Lord Xia Luo, what happened? Okay. After a bit of fooling around, Luo Ya's disappointment of losing the competition was much better. Seeing the young lady's happy face, Luo Ya's eyes, and then she reluctantly said goodbye to Luo Ya. Chapter 397. After the duel with Teresa, Luo Ya went off the stage to check his body according to the competition procedure. Another fierce battle began in the arena. But what the young man didn't expect was that when he returned to the stage after finishing all the checks, the arena was already in an uproar. Venue number 30. As a battle of spells, although the Challengers Cup added various secret realms in order to enrich the types of venues, the most basic arena still existed, which was this arena number 30. But one had to admit that even though the arena in the Leinster Battle Arena was relatively spacious compared to other places, it was still too small for the two of them right now. Although there would be spell protection around the arena, due to the spectators, in order to avoid major accidents, the rules stipulated that anyone who stepped out of the arena would be judged as the loser. Besides, Lillian wasn't the only one who stepped out of the arena, but her summoned creatures as well. The noisy shouting in the arena continued, and there was obviously a fierce debate on the side of the tournament organizer. The higher-ups of the Austin Empire strongly requested for a new venue for the sake of Her Royal Highness, which led to the match not starting yet. But after a long discussion, the tournament officials decided to uphold the original result of the draw. 1 second remember. Antonio was at the top of the Extraordinaries, the long-established speaker of the country of scholars, and the headmaster of St. Freya Academy. His position in Shia was extremely high, and no one dared to challenge him, especially when his actions were completely in line with the rules of the tournament. In the arena, Lillian's Magician Legion was basically crippled, and the knights didn't have enough distance to charge, so the combat troops she chose to use were a small-scale, high-quality combination. William's tactic was even simpler, and that was to force Lillian to step out of the arena. In the arena, Williams began to attack without caring about the consumption of his spell power. The surging spell power turned into a tide of light through the skill of the Heart Sword, attacking Lillian endlessly on the opposite side of the arena. The final result was as expected. After the end of the match, the live audience who saw the result of the verdict began to talk about it. There were rare complaints about the competition. After all, in everyone's opinion, this match between three source-grade players should be the most exciting battle in the entire Challengers Cup. But now, it seemed that it wasn't even as satisfying as Luo Ya's match. Especially the audience from the Austin Empire, many of them were furious. The moment Lillian saw Luo Ya, she was taken aback and her stern expression softened a little. After informing the staff around her, Her Royal Highness walked over to the young man with an apologetic look on her face. No, this battle has nothing to do with Senior Sister's strength. It's because of the venue. Hearing Lillian's self-reproach, the young man fell silent. For a moment, he didn't know how to comfort the young lady. Really, you really know how to find excuses for me. the black-haired young man said with a smile on his face. Lillian could not help but curl her lips as well. She closed her eyes and let out a long sigh of relief, before turning to the young man and reminding him. "All right, I understand." Chapter 398. On the Santa Freya commercial street at night, under the streetlights, the black-haired young man looked at the words in Teresa's notebook and fell into a daze for a moment. Such words reflected in the young man's eyes made Luoya confused and at a loss at what to do at the same time. Currently, Shia was not in a large-scale war for the time being, and Luoya was the only son of the Marquis of the Theocracy. Where did this so-called hardship come from? However, your clan, that Teresa mentioned caught Luoya's attention. The Ard clan. To be precise, it's Mr. Luoya's ancestor, Wendy Ard. Suddenly hearing the name of an ancestor that he had never heard of before, the black-haired young man frowned and his gaze became a lot more serious. However, he did not expect Teresa to suddenly change the topic and ask a question that surprised Luoya. "I've heard of it. It's an alliance formed by angels, dragons, and highland elves, right? I've seen an ancestor who protected their great creation in a historical fragment before. Why? Is this matter related to the alliance of the three races?" The pink-haired girl wrote silently and told Luoya a piece of unknown history of the three races in ancient times. In ancient times, as time passed and Shia's environment changed, the mythical races gradually could not adapt to this world. They anxiously searched for a way to continue their bloodline and finally set their sights on the human race that many prophecies said would become powerful. That was why there were so many alien bloodlines today. However, the prophecies of the alliance of the three races did not stop there. Whether it was the mother goddess or the savior, they had brought great disasters to the supernatural races in ancient times. Therefore, preventing them from reviving had always been one of the major goals of the Twilight Sage Association. Luoya had long been aware of this point, but the young man was not concerned about this point. Luoya frowned deeply as the figures of the two girls appeared in his mind. He took it seriously in his heart, but at the same time, he was a little puzzled because although this prophecy was important, it did not seem to belong to Luoya. That's right. Because at the end of the Second Era, Wendy Ard of the Ard clan once again accurately predicted this prophecy. This is also the reason for William's current situation. At the end of the Second Era, one of the scattered members of the Twilight Sage Association. She was a famous master of astrology and prophecy at that time. Almost all the members in the early days of the Kingdom of Knights were followers who were saved by her. In other words, the Kingdom of Knights was a country established by her knights. Hearing this, the black-haired young man couldn't help but widen his eyes. He finally understood why the Kingdom of Knights treated him so differently. But Wendy Ard and Ard's prophecy, Wendy's prophecy, Shiz's, but Wendy, Ard's, SSSS. But even when she was dying, Luoya, this great ancestor, was still worried about the future of the people around her. And because of that, she used her unparalleled talent to predict the fate for the last time. The prophecy was the prophecy of the destruction of the three races alliance and the future of the Ard clan who had always been fighting against them. The prophecy was about the time of the destruction of the three races alliance. Wendy predicted that it would happen 1,000 years later, and that the Ard clan's inheritance would be severed. The bloodline awakened would face great danger. However, the prophecy about the specific situation of the Ard clan was very chaotic. First prophecy, the descendants of the Ard clan will fall into depravity. They are in great danger. Stay away. Third prophecy, the descendants of the Ard clan will die in an academy under the witness of the successors of the three races. Chapter 399. Do you feel guilty about this to me? Normally, the natural awakening of your clan would make the user of the Shadow Warrior armor feel something and take action. But for so many years, Williams didn't feel anything. As for the so-called guilt, Luoya didn't even know where to start. After knowing the series of things about Williams, Luoya, who got a death exemption, didn't feel happy. Instead, he was angry. But he had to admit that he actually understood the Ald clan's approach rationally. Was the Ald clan wrong? From their point of view, they weren't wrong. The users of the armor were obviously voluntary. They must have received great kindness from the Ald clan and were willing to repay with their lives. The purpose of doing this was only to prevent the sudden death of their clansmen due to the awakening of their bloodline. Remember. Under the street lamp, the black-haired boy opened his eyes. He looked at the girl beside him calmly and said softly, "Why? Williams is very strong. He must be of great help to Mr. Luoya, right?" Facing Luoya's sudden question, the pink-haired girl's pen paused. She blinked and didn't know how to answer for a moment. The black-haired boy saw this and smiled faintly. Looking at the starry sky in the distance, the black-haired boy sighed under Teresa's surprised gaze and said, "The reason is very simple. Because we are warriors who resist fate. We resist the fate of certain death, the fate of the decline of our clan, and the unfortunate fate of our loved ones. We are in a desperate situation, but we will never bow to fate. This is our spirit and also our glory. Because of this, Akkad can survive for thousands of years after its inheritance was cut off." The young man's resolute voice caused the girl beside him to widen her eyes. On the other side, the white-haired witch silently chanted the hero's name as the corner of her lips curled up. The Earth Mother closed her eyes in peace. In the blood-colored plains, the eyes of the gigantic skeleton burst out with radiance. That was the praise from a warrior who was equally as great. Luoya didn't deny the concerns and actions of the ancestors of the Ald clan. However, as the saying went, there were things that a great man should and shouldn't do. Luoya wouldn't back down on some choices. But Williams is very stubborn. I don't think he'll give up on bringing you away. He thinks it's his duty and his goal. I hope that he can choose again and choose his own goal. That's right. If his purpose is to become a guardian of the past prophecy, then our differences will probably always exist. I will also insist on rejecting him. But if his purpose is to become someone who can travel together with me and fight alongside me, then I will use the way of the country of knights to let him understand that his fate has changed and meaningless sacrifices are no longer necessary. Well then, Miss Teresa, let's call it a night. Thank you for telling me all this." Hearing the words of the pink-haired girl, Luoya nodded slightly and turned around to leave the commercial street. Teresa smiled at the young man's back until Luoya completely disappeared. Then, she turned her gaze to a corner behind her. And under her gaze, the young girl in a cloak and full of armor finally appeared. He should have noticed it too. Your presence is too unique." After several interactions, Teresa actually had the intention to understand Luoya's character. Today's conversation was also based on the premise that Teresa believed that Luoya wouldn't accept William's self-sacrifice. And the reason was simple. As an elder sister, Teresa didn't want her distant relative to have such an ending. Every time she saw Williams in this state, Teresa, who used to play with him when they were young, would feel heartache. Both of them had the bloodline of dragons. She, who was known as the Princess of Curses, lived a luxurious life and was loved by the people. However, a real princess couldn't even wear a dress. "How is it, Mina? Are you happy? Didn't I say that he wouldn't leave you alone?" The young girl in armor lowered her head, not knowing how to react. Teresa smiled and wrote, "What? Noble and proud, fearless and powerful. Isn't this the spirit that a knight pursues?" Thinking so, the young girl ridiculed the young man's duplicity in her heart. She had to admit that Luoya's performance in the previous battle had trampled on the young girl's points. It was also because of this that Williams hid in a panic and only dared to show himself after leaving. What's left was a true competition of strength. Before such a major competition began, the contestants would deliberately avoid contact. On one hand, it was to prevent being accused of colluding to manipulate the competition. On the other hand, private contact could affect the fighting spirit of both sides, thus affecting the results of the competition. In the eyes of the young man, this was no longer just a competition for the championship of the Challengers Cup. It was also a competition to prove his beliefs and strength. His opponent wasn't just Williams, but also the will left behind by Alfred from 1,000 years ago, which was no longer in line with the times. Due to the controversial nature of the previous match between Williams and Lillian, the reputation of the tournament organizers had taken a hit. Regarding this, the tournament planners had to actively deal with public relations, and the method was to divert the attention of the public to the next match. Although the battle between Luoya and Williams wasn't as eye-catching as the Battle of the Century, or the clash of the two strongest geniuses due to the difference in their strength, it was fortunate that Luoya's performance throughout the competition was outstanding. Many spectators in the Austin Empire believed that Lillian's match was rigged. A considerable number of them were antagonistic towards Williams, so they hoped that Luoya would win. But it must be said that these spectators in the Austin Empire weren't Luoya's supporters. To be precise, they supported anyone who wasn't Williams to become the champion. This year's Challengers Cup was the only one where the age of participants was lowered. But after the cruel elimination, the two contestants who made it to the finals were both first-year students. This became the biggest explosive point of the competition. The meaning of the words golden generation could be said to be quite significant. In history, those who were crowned with this title were the heroes of the generation who led the race through the crisis when mankind was facing a crisis. In the current situation where the alien race was in danger, this word represented the future of mankind. The promotion of the championship title made the entire competition even more important. The news media, the people of Leinster, the spectators from all over the world, and even the official teams of each country were a little restless. They began to stand on the side to create momentum for the contestants they favored. Under the notice of the casino and in front of the bar counter in the tavern, all kinds of disputes continued. In the Leinster Battle Arena, more than 100 contestants who passed the preliminary round had gathered again. They were waiting in the spectator seats to see who would become the champion of the younger generation. In the commentator seats, the officials of the theocracy and the country of knights were also nervous. Of course, they hoped that their countries would obtain the final honor. At the highest point, Antonio's face was calm and the corners of his mouth were curled up in a smile. Under everyone's expectant gaze, the opening music played and the final curtain slowly opened. Chapter 400. Leinster, the capital of the Kingdom of Scholars, was now deserted. Amidst the majestic music, the Leinster Coliseum welcomed the main characters of the building with the highest level of etiquette. Four carriages specially prepared to welcome the contestants drove into the arena, and the audience cheered in unison. In the Rose faction, Paul and Gerlach led their members to cheer loudly for Luoya who entered the arena. Next door, Sia Luot, who was surrounded by the nobles of Rochet, did not perform divination today. Instead, she chose to witness everything with her eyes. With the vast terrain, Lillian's army spread out smoothly, while Teresa used spells to shift to the air to fight. The battle of attrition between the two sides was quite intense. In the end, Lillian secured victory with the great spell of the Magician Legion. Under the watchful eyes of the audience, the black-haired young man and the knight in heavy armor finally entered the arena. At the same time, the cheers of the supporters of both sides rang out. The overly loud sound once overwhelmed the voice of the tournament organizers, forcing the tournament host to wave his hand to calm the crowd. Don't worry, give it your all. This is a once-in-a-lifetime match. No matter what, we shouldn't leave any regrets here. To hold back in this final match was not only disrespectful to the audience, but also to the other contestants who had fought in the tournament. Williams seemed to agree with this point. Well, then let's decide with victory or defeat, whether it's your fate or mine. Due to the fierce battle of the Challengers Cup, the contestants with powerful curses often suffered excessive injuries. The tournament organizers generally increased the substitute curse beasts for both sides in the final to ensure safety. Therefore, in this game, the substitute curse beasts for Roja and Williams increased from 5 to 10. Antonio, who who was wearing a robe, glanced at the two below and smiled. Then, he held up the crystal ball and spoke under the nervous gaze of the audience. As soon as he finished speaking, the scene in the crystal ball constantly changed and finally stopped on a crimson land. Oh! Scorched mountain range. The climate was hot, the land was crimson, and there was almost no vegetation. Therefore, it could be said that there was no decent hiding place. To some extent, the situation was somewhat similar to the battle against Gelt. There was basically no opportunity to ambush the enemy. Therefore, there was only one tactic left to be used, a head-on confrontation. Fighting spirit burned silently in the hearts of the boy and girl. The responsibility that had been instilled in them for many years conflicted with the personal desire in the bottom of their hearts, making Williams long for Luoya to give her an answer. The black-haired boy had long since made up his mind to break Williams' shackles with his own hands. The dregs of the old era should be removed, and the people who were bound should be liberated. And the beginning of all of this was this moment, this very moment. Sword intent. This was something that Luoya had never felt before. But now, it was really displayed in front of him, making him feel an enormous pressure. Under this pressure, his body began to produce hallucinations. Luoya had a vague premonition that William's heart sword was about to reach its peak. Chapter 401. Trump cards were the most important factor in a supernatural being's battle. This was because it was generally difficult to determine the outcome of a battle using ordinary spells. Only unexpected abilities or battle tactics would be able to deal a decisive blow. Although this statement was too absolute, it showed how important trump cards were to extraordinaries. And powerful extraordinaries such as Xia usually had 2 trump cards. Different source substances often led to a decisive difference in the way extraordinaries obtained their power. This difference was more inclined towards growth. Most of the time, it did not affect the battle as much as imagined. The thing that really affected the battle the most was the bloodline. Among William's trump cards, one was the heart sword that he had tempered with his willpower for many years, the other was courage, one of the 3 most suitable origin substances for battle, and the last was the giant dragon bloodline that he had inherited from ancient times. In front of him, Petra's curse flame stream had turned into a raging fire, and a burning heat wave swept across the already scorching land. However, in the center of the flames, William's curse reaction not only did not decrease, but also expanded like never before. Amidst the burning lava from the Earth's core, a pair of golden eyes lit up under the blazing flames. At the moment it opened its eyes, a pressure that belonged to ancient mythical creatures came from afar, as if it could topple the mountains and overturn the seas. It spread out its wings, and the scorching lava was easily split apart like it was a toy, completely exposing its majestic body to everyone's eyes. The judges of the tournament were speechless as they watched the video. The department in charge of the arcane realm was very nervous. The rising spell reaction was as awe-inspiring as the majestic appearance of the giant creature, but it also made the arcane realm very uneasy. In the scorched mountain range, Luoya looked into the distance with a serious face. As the only person who faced the dragon's pressure head-on, he knew better than anyone else how terrifying Williams was. Atavistic bloodline. This was the truth behind Williams' incomprehensible power. The giant dragon constructed with this powerful bloodline ability was almost the same as a real giant dragon. Thousands of meters away, the dragon and the black-haired young man looked at each other. Both sides knew that they could no longer fight a war of attrition. A strange silence fell. Neither Williams nor Luoya acted rashly, but the spell power in the arcane realm began to gather around them. The audience in the arena returned to their seats after the commotion, nervously waiting for the two to make their next move. Time went by, but the situation on the battlefield did not change much except that Luoya removed Pei Tila's appearance. The dragon and the giant faced each other from afar. The atmosphere became more and more tense as time passed. Roar! The black-haired youth raised his head under the all-destroying dragon flames. His golden eyes lit up as if they were burning. His voice was calm as he recited his final trump card, which also changed the world. Under the impact of the curse, the origin substance of the crown trembled violently, and the crown stone exploded with a dazzling light. The figure of an ancient, destructive civilization flashed behind the young man, as if it had reappeared in the world. The moment he spoke, the scorched earth seemed to have been extinguished, and the sky began to change color. An explosive cold air rushed into the sky, freezing everything. Boom! The two completely different types of destruction consumed each other. A vortex of spell power was born between heaven and earth. The battle between the two of them was far beyond the level of an ordinary source grade 3. The entire arcane realm shook violently. The staff outside the arena panicked. The monitoring department was also in a mess. However, at the highest point of the arena, the white-haired old man who was watching the video did not stop the battle. Chapter 402. Williams had a dream. At that time, the girl didn't have powerful supernatural abilities. She wore a white dress and played with Sister Teresa on the grass. She was as lively and free as most children of her age. They walked through the garden and played in the palace. Heavy and ugly, the girl didn't want to wear such things, but for the prophecy 1,000 years ago, for the mission of her family, she still reached out her hand. "What are you going to do?" Hearing the question in her ear, the girl looked at the black-haired and golden-eyed child who appeared out of nowhere. After thinking for a moment, she answered. "No, that kind of thing, I don't need it." Everything nearby gradually glowed in her footsteps and finally disappeared. "Are you awake?" In the final confrontation, Williams's heart soared and Luo Ya's frozen earth power conflicted. Under the two different forces, neither side had any means of defense. The only choice was to attack with all their might. Both of them knew that whoever smashed all the others' substitute curse vessels first would win the final victory. The long sword in the armored knight's hand cut deeply into the boy's shoulder, and the blood splattered on his cheek. On the other side, Luo Ya's hand touched Williams's armor and completely froze it. However, even if both sides had caused excessive damage to each other, Williams knew that she had lost. At the last moment when the sword cut into her body, Luo Ya endured great pain and froze her blood. Williams's full blow was sealed at this point. The frost froze the girl's body along the sword and Luo Ya's palm. Williams didn't regain her consciousness until the boy retracted it. The outcome was settled. Looking at the pale boy, Williams had a complicated thought. She didn't know why she wasn't annoyed, but she felt a little relieved. On the viewing platform, the officials of Pender were dumbfounded. Antonio smiled and didn't say anything. And in the corner, the pink-haired girl was excitedly wiping the corners of her eyes. She knew that the moment his identity was exposed, William's fate had already changed. Looking at the girl's heroic and delicate face at this moment, Luo Ya's golden eyes widened slightly, then she smiled helplessly. "What is it?" "Gender is not important to me. My goal is to complete my mission. But when it comes to stubbornness, you are the one. You should cherish yourself more." "Ha, that's true." "Name?" "No matter how I think about it, the name Williams is fake." "What's your real name?" "Wilhelmina." "Well then, Wilhelmina Coburnat, as the victor of the duel and the successor of the Auld family, I solemnly inform you that the task of the vow is over. You don't need to sacrifice anymore. You can take off your heavy armor, and you don't need to hide your true face anymore. Your fate is no longer dependent on me, and everything doesn't have to go according to plan. You are free. From now on, your life will belong to you." Hearing Luo Ya's calm words, the young girl's eyes slowly widened. Thousands of emotions surged into her heart in an instant. She wanted to say something, but she didn't know what to say. What if? I don't want to change anything. I see. The girl who listened to his suggestion smiled. In the next moment, the two figures disappeared in the light and returned to the familiar battle arena. Chapter 403. In the dazzling light, the black-haired boy and the armored girl returned to Leinster's arena. Both of their substitute curse vessels were damaged. They were exhausted and scarred. However, what they didn't expect was that they were greeted with deafening applause and cheers that had never been seen in the arena before. Whether it was Luo Ye's use of ancient mystic arts to forcibly break the level limit, William's bloodline materialization, or the battle between the giant dragon and the giant, everything was too shocking. In the end, Williams exposed his true form, which brought a hint of romance to the battle, making countless girls in the audience excited. After the mythical battle, the final winner was not Williams, who was source level 3, but Luo Ye, who was source level 4. This result was also unprecedented. Before this, there had never been a source level 4 victory over source level 3 in the Challenger Cup. If this battle was an exciting war blockbuster in the eyes of ordinary people, then in the eyes of these professionals, it was a popular science video. No matter who it was, even the powerful Antonio would gain something in such a battle. In the arena, Luo Ye slowly retracted the frozen earth, and Williams also let go of the sword hilt. Then the medical staff of the competition swarmed up and performed emergency treatment on the two. It's not even a fatal wound. There's nothing to be afraid of. Instead, it's the side effect. I hope it doesn't come too soon. The championship is not over after the battle. I have to receive the award later. Quick! Stop the bleeding. At the request of the medical staff, Luo Ye, who wanted to leave the arena by himself, could only lie down and be sent away. Until Luo Ye and Williams left the arena, the cheers in the arena finally subsided slowly. After the final between Luo Ye and Williams ended, the arena entered a short preparation time. Various shows were performed in the arena for the audience to pass the time. After nearly an hour of waiting, the Challenger Cup finally entered the awarding stage. This was also the reason why more than 100 contestants were invited today. Amidst this respectful and courteous reception, the thick and heavy doors of the battle arena opened once again. The crimson-red carpet flowed like a river towards the towering rostrum. The ceremonial soldiers armed to the teeth entered in 2 rows, standing on both sides of the carpet to form a corridor. When the girl appeared, there were enthusiastic cheers and applause in the arena. In the face of so many supportive audience, Williams also waved his hand, which set off another climax in the arena. After that, Teresa, Xia Luot, and the others entered the arena one by one. The tall Gelt, the mysterious and elegant Juliana, the steady grey Rose Edward, and the highly popular top 8 contestants led more than 100 contestants into the arena. Many of the spectators, especially the Leinster locals, had watched the Challengers Cup more than once. With a lot of experience, they knew that this year's Challengers Cup was far more exciting than the previous years. The biggest difference was the participation of the younger generation of the country of knights, which brought too many surprises to the spectators of various countries. In the cheers of the Golden Year, more than 100 contestants came to the official viewing platform. The representatives of the schools and the higher-ups of the academies came one by one with different badges in their hands and handed over the medals that represented honor to the contestants. At this time, Luo Ye was dressed in formal attire. After a round of emergency treatment, the wounds on the young man's body had healed, but the lost blood and spell power could not be replenished immediately. Antonio looked at Luo Ye, who still looked a little pale. He stretched out his hand and cast a few spells. Under the light, the young man looked a little better. The smiling dean also began his speech to the audience. Chapter 404. On the hospital bed, the black-haired teenager was slightly stunned when he heard the system prompt. He didn't expect that at the last moment, when the blessing of the goddess of fate was about to expire, it would actually work again. Ding! At the celebration banquet, silently stare at Williams for more than 15 seconds at a time when the other party is aware of it. Looking at the new suggestion, the black-haired teenager's expression became strange. Although according to past experience, Luo Ye would follow the suggestion, he had to admit that the suggestion this time was a little impolite. It was fine if it was a guy, but a girl. No, Staring for 15 seconds, a guy seemed to be even worse. The goddess of fate's suggestion was originally set to save Estrella. Although the teenager had encountered many accidents along the way, he basically got good results under her suggestion and steadily moved toward his goal. After winning the Challengers Cup, Luoya felt that it was time to end it. It was not uncommon for St. Freya Academy to hold a celebration after winning the Challengers Cup. It was even a tradition of the academy, so the relevant preparations had been made long ago. After 3 days of waiting, the students in the academy could not wait any longer. Before evening, the carriage specially prepared by the academy was waiting outside the Blue Hall. After dressing up, Luoya, who was wearing a formal dress, finally put down his trophy and went to the banquet venue accompanied by Paul and Gerlach. Looking at the students shouting and waving on both sides of the road, Luoya couldn't help but smile bitterly. At the same time, he felt the strong influence of the title of Challengers Cup champion among the young people. In this game, thousands of spectators became his supporters. The title of Challengers Cup champion and honorary baron of the 5 countries was brought to Shio with the officials and spectators of various countries returning home. The battle between him and Williams would become a classic in the hearts of tens of thousands of people and a topic of conversation in the future, further spreading his name. Winning the Challengers Cup champion would bring great prestige. This was already known to the world. This kind of prestige was not determined by unchangeable things such as birth, but by hard work and hard work. Therefore, it was recognized by people. However, it had to be said that this year, Luoya's popularity was even higher than the previous winners. It even exceeded his own expectations, especially in the Saint Maester theocracy. His reputation was like the sun in the sky. The black-haired boy thought helplessly. Then, he couldn't help but think of the task that Miss Angel had given him before she left. Now that he had successfully obtained the trophy, Luoya's task could be considered completed. All that was left was to pray that Noah Iyer would proceed smoothly. The event had yet to officially begin, but the banquet hall was already bustling with noise and excitement. The contestants from St. Freya's Academy arrived one by one, and there was no lack of seated contestants among them. Luoya's arrival was very sudden. It was like throwing a stone into a calm lake, stirring up waves. After the nobles of the theocracy rushed over, Xia Luo was the first to come over and show concern for Luoya's health. The boy responded seriously, and the young lady, who had been worried for the past few days, finally felt relieved. Perhaps it was because of Lillian's lead, or perhaps it was because the Challengers Cup champion title had changed Greenrose Green's view of Luoya. This time, the second-year ring-bearer chatted with Luoya for a while, but their conversation was still a little stiff. On the other hand, Grey Rose Edwards' communication skills were much better. Well, now that the border is actively preparing for war, the benefits of the soldiers in various countries are increasing. There are too many graduates from Leinster, and the competition is too fierce, so the benefits are decreasing. Although Leinster's extraordinaires had a lot of research results, they were still in the rear. Compared to the front lines, it was naturally safer and more comfortable. Under such circumstances, if the benefits were still higher than the front lines, the number of high-ranking extraordinaires on the front lines would definitely decrease. Chapter 405. For Teresa, events such as banquets were troublesome. Therefore, when she was in Pender, Teresa always had a special spokesperson by her side who could read her words in real time. But in St. Freya Academy, where only the students themselves were allowed to enter, the pink-haired girl had a hard time communicating with others, especially when the person she was communicating with was a highly sought-after character. Looking at the notebook in front of him, the black-haired boy was stunned for a moment, then looked down at the girl who grabbed the hem of his shirt. After understanding the girl's difficulties, Luoya waved his hand to reject Paul and the others who were calling for him, then brought the pink-haired girl to sit at a table so that Teresa could write. Mr. Luoya, thank you for helping Williams. Maybe that is true, but it is also a fact that your help changed Williams' fate, so please accept my thanks as her sister. The black-haired boy turned his head to look at the knight who was surrounded by fans in the distance and sighed. The pink-haired girl could not help but blush. Teresa waved her hand to express her denial, then wrote with some guilt, "Is there a problem with that? Using her? This understanding is too strict, in my opinion, it is the opposite. Miss Teresa trusts my character, so she told me everything, isn't that the case?" Hearing Luo Ya's question, the pink-haired girl widened her eyes slightly. She thought for a moment, then nodded with a blush on her cheeks. "Thank you for your understanding, Mr. Luoya. What should I do?" "About this, I'm afraid that Mr. Luoya will have to ask her personally." The students who were originally running around in a mess stopped talking and greeted Antonio, who was dressed up. Teacher Chris also looked radiant today. A group of teachers entered the banquet hall and walked to the end of the hall and to Luoya's side amidst applause. "Fortunately, I did not disappoint you. After all, there are not many opportunities to surprise the dean." Antonio's face was full of smiles as he sighed in admiration of the younger generation. Then, he solemnly announced the official start of St. Freya's celebration. At the same time, hundreds and thousands of cursed fireworks rose into the sky, and grand music played at the same time. From the banquet hall to the square outside, the excited students cheered continuously. The celebration was in the form of a meal. The food was provided by St. Freya Academy, and the drinks were paid for by Leinster City Hall. Under such circumstances, eating and drinking was inevitable, or rather, most of the celebrations in Shia were like this. Chapter 406. Under the moonlight, Luoya looked at the smiling girl in front of him. He thought for a while and called out her name softly. "Yes, it's me. I don't really care about names, but if there's anything that needs to be changed, I think it's a good idea to start with this name. But even so, it's impossible to make everyone change their names all of a sudden. After all, it's been so many years. I want to start with those close to me." Luoya said and bowed to Wilhelmina. The girl looked away embarrassedly. The young man smiled and thought for a while before asking a serious question. "No, we plan to stay here. I say, do you not welcome us?" The black-haired young man waved his hand and explained. After hearing Wilhelmina's answer, he felt a lot more relaxed. No matter what the reason was, it was a fact that Wilhelmina had endured torturous training for him. It was also a fact that she was willing to sacrifice herself for him. Although it was all arranged by the ancestors of the Auld family, Luoya, the beneficiary, couldn't be indifferent. As for Brittany, he had an agreement with her. She had a close relationship with his subordinate, Gerlach, and would probably join the consulting department in the future. He didn't have much contact with Stuart, but Luoya had a few words with him. At least their communication was friendly. Of course, there was a more important reason. Luoya felt that the country of knights was too isolated. The descendants of the Twilight Sage Association were rare talents. They had the potential to become the strongest in Shia. No matter if it was fame or resources, they deserved more. The Golden Generation. Indeed, reputation is important to knights. But the main reason why we're staying here is because of you. Of course. After all, the third prophecy exists. Although you said that it's no longer effective and you don't want to leave, we're still worried about leaving you here alone. It's not just me. The 7 of us made this decision together. After hearing this, Luoya blinked in surprise. Suddenly, he felt warmth in his heart. On the other hand, the girl hesitated for a long time and brought up the old topic again. "Yes, I can. Are you not welcoming me with this reaction? Speaking of which, isn't this similar to how I was before?" "No, I'm just a little surprised." "Speaking of which, why did you suddenly join?" "Yeah, I agree with that." Luoya's prophecy was naturally not the 3 prophecies about himself, but the prophecy of Wendy Ald's prophecy about the alliance of the 3 races 1,000 years ago, which was the so-called prophecy of destruction. Wilhelmina's 3rd prophecy about Luoya had failed, so she was a little optimistic about the prophecies of her ancestors. But Luoya, who knew the truth, did not dare to let his guard down. Strictly speaking, all 3 prophecies were correct. Luoya personally felt that the possibility was not high. Difficulties existed, but they were definitely not a dead end. This was the experience that Luoya had summed up after many years of struggle. But it had to be said that this time, the difficulty was a little big. Perhaps they would need more strength and more preparation to overcome it. For this reason, Luoya wanted to propose some suggestions. Min, what is Min Na? Don't randomly call other people by their names. No, it's not that I dislike it, it's just that I'm not used to it. Speaking of which, who are the other people you're talking about? It's Noah, Ayer and the others. I want them to join as well. After hearing Luoya's suggestion, Wilhelmina fell into a rare silence. Obviously, she was a little conflicted about the girls around Luoya. Seeing this, she said, no matter if it's the theocracy or Rose, they are all big countries under Shia. They shouldn't drag down the Knight's country. Instead, they should be able to complement each other. Of course, I understand your worries. They might not believe in a prophecy without any evidence. But fortunately, I have some influence in the theocracy and Rose. Under Luoya's persuasion, the girl finally relented a little. She looked at the young man with a serious expression and said, well, I understand that. The others may not be able to do it, but I think they can. The four of them had no problem in terms of stance or willingness, so Luoya could ask the girls to join without hesitation. However, Luoya didn't want to involve the others who were close to Luoya. As the protagonists' team in the original work, Luoya estimated that they wouldn't be able to escape in the future. Everyone was doing this for the future of mankind, and the final outcome was likely to be the same, so he wasn't in a hurry. Saving Estrid was Luoya's initial goal. According to Antonio, the Knight's country didn't agree with his research on Dream of Chaos, fearing that it would lead to the awakening of the Savior. However, Luoya, who had contact with Estrid in that era, knew that the two had nothing to do with each other. He had to save Estrid, but he was afraid that he would have to wait until Wilhelmina, Luoya, and the others had more say, and the right to speak was linked to strength, so in the end, he still had to have real ability. Luoya returned to the banquet hall first, while Wilhelmina went to put on her armor again. At this time, after Antonio and the other teaching staff left the hall, the originally reserved students started to have fun. The extraordinaries had a high degree of body mutation and had a strong endurance, so most of them were good at drinking. As the protagonist, Luoya was naturally dragged into the party. It was understandable that the Knight's country had its customs, not to mention that as a member of the royal family, it was even more admirable to take the lead in following the chivalry and principles. With this reason, the firepower of the girls was greatly reduced, leaving only Luoya to charge. More than an hour later, Luoya finally finished dealing with all the excited students. The young man spent the rest of the time chatting with Xia Luot and the others until midnight, when the celebration officially ended. After the celebration, St. Freya's Academy entered a 2-day break. The indulgent students were able to adjust a little so that their normal lives would not be affected by the hangover. After 3 days of revelry, the whole city of Leinster finally exhausted the remaining excitement of the Challengers' Cup and gradually calmed down. As the tourists left, the merchants also entered a rest period after high-intensity work. The whole city seemed to have changed from young people dancing in nightclubs to middle-aged people soaking in goji berries in thermos cups. The biggest reward of the Challengers' Cup champion was naturally the influence brought by the reputation and the noble title of the 5 countries, but the material rewards were also equally rich, such as the commission of municipal taxes during the event. One of the reasons was naturally that with the development of the times, the people of various countries were getting richer. Another reason was the existence of transfer students from the Knight's country, which led to more people coming to watch the competition, especially the nobles from Pendar. Of course, the most important thing was that the competition was really exciting. How long had it been since the Challengers' Cup? It had only been a little more than 2 months, including the preparation before and after, and the tax revenue had exceeded the 1 million gold coins mark. This was daylight robbery. Cities were just like people. If one wanted to be rich, there had to be something different. Perhaps it had to follow the tide of history, or it had to have some unique skills. Leinster was a typical city where educational resources were concentrated. It was unique and irreplaceable, and this accumulation began 1,000 years ago. The first school year lasted from the beginning of spring to autumn. The final exams had long ended before the Challengers' Cup began, and after the largest competition of the younger generation came to an end, the students of St. Freya's Academy finally welcomed the first school year break. The winter break and summer break were designed to avoid the coldest and hottest seasons, but the problem was that the students of St. Freya's Academy came from various countries. If it was really a semester system, many of them would have to go back and forth between home and the academy for half a year. Therefore, St. Freya's Academy's break was from the end of autumn of the first year to the beginning of spring of the second year. This half a year was more suitable for all the students, and at the beginning of the year, the nobles had to do and participate in many activities, such as leading the people in winter and various New Year's parties. Luoya, on the other hand, had other things to do, such as taking advantage of this last time to meet someone he would not be able to see for the next half a year. Lillian Ackerman, you're tuning into the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.